Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this December 16th meeting of the Richmond Select Board. Before we begin, would anybody care to make a public comment? Kara?
Just a couple of quick items. One is your FY24 budget was released. The draft version was released on December 9th. It was due to you on October 31st. I see it's not an agenda item tonight, and I see it's not an agenda item tomorrow night. And you're planning an FY26 budget without your FY24 audit information. You also have no FY25, which we are already past the first quarter of FY25, no actual numbers for that as well. So I think it would be very helpful in your planning process for you to have more information rather than less. Just one piece of information. The other piece of information is the Town Center Committee and Library Building Committee has met back on October 9th. We requested that you put out an RFP or consider hiring a owner project manager. And my understanding is no motion was made by the select board, so no movement can move forward with that with an RFP. That's what we've been told. Whether that's inaccurate information or not, it came from Duncan, who writes the RFPs. So if you're not asking him to write one, he's not writing one. So need to find out where you are with that, because the Town Center Committee is on hold with moving forward if we're going to have a owner project manager guide us through the process versus we're not going back to a $9.8 million proposed improvement building. We are going a different route. Last thing is, before tomorrow's night's budget meeting, I request that you guys consider looking at Hinesburg's town budget. We are not in line with a lot of things that we are over budgeting compared to what they're budgeting for, even for line items for their own police department. So I'm very concerned about that. Look at their highway budget, which has, my understanding is more miles than the town of Richmond miles covered. So it's a really good budget to look at, to have yourself do a little check, since I've been complaining that we're over budgeting on line items repetitively. Please look at, I have a copy of it here. I'll be ready tomorrow night to talk to you about their line items versus our line items, because again, we are continuing to over budget. Lastly is the other item of deputy manager that's being proposed, that new titled position. I did call arounds to see other towns that have deputy managers. Williston does not. City of Essex Junction does not. Hinesburg does not. I think those are very comparative places for us to be looking at budget-wise. So I strongly recommend you reconsider that, or give me a list of towns that have deputy managers that Richmond is comparable to. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
I brought this all up just because you guys have a budget meeting tomorrow night, in case you need to do any research tomorrow before tomorrow night's budget meeting.
Bart?
Give my day tomorrow. I won't be doing any research tomorrow during the day between now and then, but maybe we can take these items up at our budget meeting tomorrow night.
Well, you have town staff, so you might want to ask a question of town staff.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would also like to note, as I did at the water and sewer meeting, go Catamounts.
Definitely.
Logo.
Anybody else?
Starts the date. So things are gonna get a little distracted after that.
Phone's off. Anybody else want to make public comment? Okay, moving on. Reminder of the special select board meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, December 17th, to work on the fiscal year 26 budget. Josh, board, any additions, deletions, or modifications to tonight's agenda? Bard?
No,
Okay. Thought you were raising your hand.
no, sorry.
Just stretching.
Okay, are we ready to talk about budgeting for shared police services with Hinesburg?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Is Mary Lee here?
yeah, their chair was going to possibly join this evening. I don't see her there yet. I could give an update. I've chatted with their town manager.
Yeah, go ahead.
So.
Somebody's connecting. Oh, it's Anthony.
Chief Cambridge. So, some of these are around really budgeting issues. So we've talked with town manager Todd Odit over in Hinesburg. They still have an interest in sharing a police chief for the foreseeable future. So right now in our budget, we've got a contracted chief, which is basically half a chief's salary that we were splitting with Hinesburg. Seems like that is also their intention right now to continue forward with that. I did bring up the cost of potentially splitting an administrative assistant. Sounded like they might be able to do about 10 hours or so of that. They've got some part-time police budget for part-time police officers that they haven't really actually filled for the last couple of years. So there might be some money there to move forward with some split of an administrative assistant for the police department. And I think, just sort of a renewed statement that both towns are interested in continuing cooperation with police coverage sort of as it is right now while Richmond's understaffed. And then when Richmond is fully staffed, it would change a bit on the financial back and forth between the towns. But I think there's still continued interest in sharing police services to some extent and might constitute another meeting of that subcommittee that meets occasionally on policing.
Art?
So I called Marilee because this was coming up for both of us on, I think, Friday, and and I think we should focus on the budget question. There she is, so we can let Marilee speak, but in terms of budget, it was the chief position, which at that point was tentatively 50-50, still an intent for shared police services and kind of a question mark for the admin assistant. You'll recall that we were asked by Richmond Racial Equity to fund the admin assistant at 40 hours. It's currently
Or
budgeted
30.
at 20.
Yeah.
And so what's the right number across the two towns? And a question, I'll let Marilee jump in, but I know their meeting is Wednesday, where they hope to finalize their budget. So I don't think she can speak to a final budget, but maybe a supposal or proposal.
Hey,
I'm
Marilee,
sorry.
welcome.
What's the question that I'm answering?
Oh, we were just starting the discussion on budgeting for police services and what that might look like with Hinesburg. So your arrival was timely.
Okay.
And we were
good.
just visiting the three different components that we talked about, 50-50 for a chief position, some shared policing in terms of officer coverage, however that plays out, partly dependent on not only budgeted, but filled positions. And then the last question was the admin assistant or admin support position, which in our current year is budgeted in Richmond at 20 hours a week.
Correct.
So of course, I can't speak for the whole select board. We are, as you know, we have a very tight budget this year in Hinesburg, and we're really trying to not cut any positions and salaries, but we are cutting a lot of other things. I have asked numerous times if we can't have an admin position for the police department, but I can't say that would be supported. I will continue to advocate for it, but when I have advocated for it in the past, it hasn't been supported. So I don't know if it would be now. But I do think it's a good idea. And if Anthony only gets 20 hours from Richmond, that's better than nothing. I'm sorry to say I don't know if Hinesburg has the resources right now to support that.
Art?
Marilee, is it safe to say that you hope to be done with the Hinesburg budget on Wednesday, the 18th, couple days?
That's correct, yes, because then we have to present it to the voters at our next meeting, which will be January 8th at a public hearing. And it still could be changed at that time.
Right.
And after that meeting, then we will, at the end of January, I believe, then we will solidify it, have the final budget that we'll present at town meeting.
Josh Board, any questions for Marilee before I call on Jeff? Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate the focus on the police department. Marilee, do you know how many officers you're budgeting for?
I'm not really clear on that. I know from the get-go, we had 6 officers and the 6th one was always contingent on the contract with Richmond. So we had the 6th because we were covering both Hinesburg and Richmond. Anthony met with Josh and Todd, so maybe you have a better idea of that, Anthony. My understanding is Anthony and Josh and Todd will work out the number of officers that's best for our continued cooperation.
Yeah, from my conversations, it really, from based on what I've talked to Todd about, it seems like he's shooting for 5, but he's unsure what way the board's going to go and what way the town, the people of Hinesburg are going to want to go. I guess it could be, it's definitely not going to be 6, but it could be 4 potentially. But I think there's some people that are hopeful for 5.
Right, thanks for reminding me. The current budget does have 5. And I, for one, don't want to go through what we went through. How many years ago was it, losing officers because we cut the police budget? That's not going to happen if I can help it.
So could I make a follow-up comment, Dave?
Go ahead.
Okay, I think this is something that the two towns really ought to be working together on, because you could lose officers in Hinesburg and they pick up in Richmond, and that that may be good for us. It may not be good for you. It seems to me that what we need to be working towards is parity between the two towns. Parity for number of officers and parity on pay. Otherwise, we're going to, rob Peter to pay Paul. So, I would encourage whoever has to work on that. And I think the select board does have a pretty significant role, even though the town managers, have the day-to-day contact. The select boards really, set the tone of what should be expected. I don't know if folks saw that article in the Citizen, this week. But it would seem like police services for both of our town are an essential service, and we need this. This is a good arrangement. We need to figure out how to continue it.
Thank you, Jeff. Anthony, go ahead.
I just real quick wanted to clarify, there's a little difference on how we categorize things between the two towns. For as long as I can remember, we've said that it was however many officers, and we always include the chief's position. So when we say 6, by Richmond terms, it's really 5.
Right.
So there's 4 officers, and then they're not budgeting for that 5th. So if Hinesburg was to go on the budgeted track that they're on right now, and Richmond was to go on the budgeted track that they're potentially on, we'd be looking at 4 positions in Hinesburg and 4 positions in Richmond, plus the split chief position. So if ever in a perfect world the towns would be on par to look exactly the same for policing.
For staffing.
For staffing, yes.
Jeff, is your hand still up?
Well, one final question. Anthony, has Anthony been authorized to look for additional officers? I mean, it's kind of this funny arrangement. He's a Hinesburg town employee, but we contract that service. Has he been told to go look for officers?
Since the start of the contract last summer, yes, our intent has been to fill the positions. We've had some applications, we've had some interviews, we've been able to hire 1 officer out of that right now. But at no point were we not trying to fill the positions.
Great. 1 officer and a dog, and the dog is fantastic.
The dog, of course, yes.
Any questions, comments, thoughts? Oh, Kara, go ahead. Thank you.
Carla Bounty. Marilee, can I just ask you a question? On your proposed Hinesburg budget, you've done a reduction in police salaries by about $40,000, or Chief Cambridge, if you could answer that for your proposed FY 26 budget, you've reduced your amount by 40,000. Can I ask what that was?
Yes, that was the sixth officer. And Anthony's right, when we say 5 officers, that's including the chief. But that was the sixth officer that was contingent on the Richmond contract, because our budget going forward was assuming that that contract would not be what it had been in previous years, because Richmond is hiring officers.
And I'm trying to understand how we have no net gain in officers. We lost an officer and hired an officer at the same time
In the spring.
in the spring. So we have no net gain in officers, and if potentially there's an officer coming off from the Hinesburg budget, is there a reason we're not hiring them on in Richmond? And is the union possibly preventing us from filling our positions more so than what we realize?
Don't think, is the union preventing
We
that?
are one of the only towns that have a union that send police officers home with a police cruiser, one of the only in the state of Vermont. Not the only, because the state troopers
Sorry,
go
is
home,
your question, is the presence of the union
preventing
like?
officers from wanting to work for.
Okay, I can't add.
Not
to
like
that.
physically obstructing, just kind of
Right.
turning them off.
I don't know what it is, because if you're gonna lose one in Hinesburg, why aren't we gaining one in Richmond if we've got the same officer, if we got the same chief that we're sharing between the two
To be
departments?
fair, I don't think they actually are, they're not firing anyone. They're not budgeting for a role that's unfilled, right?
And right now they haven't,
That's-
yeah, they haven't finalized their budget. Right now they have, I believe they're staffed at 5 officers and the shared chief. And they haven't made the final decision on their budget yet, if they're gonna budget for 4 officers. If they're gonna budget for 4 officers, then I think presumably that would leave an officer out of a job in Hinesburg. And at that point, if they would like to apply to Richmond, I'd be happy to look at their interview, at their application. Okay, Chief Cambridge, did I sum that up correctly as far as you currently have 5 officers in Hinesburg, right?
Yes, and of course, we'd be happy to entertain them coming over. I can't speak for them as to whatever the reason is that they wouldn't shift over, so.
Marilee, go ahead.
So on the other hand, if Richmond would say, look, we like the contract the way it is, the way it has been, let's just keep with that, we would keep that 6th officer. And we would. And we.
Sorry, Marilee, I was jumping in. Finish. I cut you off.
We would change our budget to be, to reflect that.
I just want to be clear that at no point were we not planning to restaff the police department. It hasn't happened as quickly as we would like. But the contract with Hinesburg for shared services, where Richmond was paying Hinesburg, was set up to be temporary until Richmond was more fully staffed. So we continue to strive for full staff.
And we've been in that contract with Hinesburg for how many years now?
About a year and a half.
But we had them for longer than the year and a half. Was there a contract before this contract?
No, the first contract, I believe, for shared police services was like spring of 23. Yeah, spring of 23. And that's when we were atrophying down to, I think at that point we had maybe 1 officer who was currently on leave, so we really needed the coverage, with the idea that like it was going to be short term. Short term has turned out to be not so short, but at no point were we like, oh, we're not going to hire because we have the contract with Hinesburg. We were always intending to hire those officers, those positions. Like I said, we've been interviewing as we've been getting applications.
We've been under contract with Hinesburg since FY 23. We've been not fully staffed since FY 20. I think I read the meeting minutes of in 2019, you had a lot of turnover, and that's when everything was shifting. So for FY 20, 21, 22, 23, we wanted a contract with them. We've already got a FY 24 that we have a budget audited information that we had salaries of $20,000 for the 1 officer. And it cost us an additional $80,000 in overhead for that department. So I'm trying to figure out, would it possibly be better to have Hinesburg budget in their 6th officer that we know are guaranteed they've got one, while we're still on the wish list for getting some, since we haven't had some since we've had one officer, not a full department since FY20. I'm just trying to think through so that Hinesburg can plan their budget as well. I don't want to miss this opportunity.
Maybe we should talk about the collective bargaining agreement and the agreement with the union, which is, as I understood it, to be interim because the union's interest is not in contracting with Hinesburg. Not surprisingly, the union's interest is getting
Union members.
funded positions in Richmond filled with union members. And they do have authority as the collective bargaining entity for our police department. So we're sort of walking a tightrope, if you will, between our short-term realities. This is just my personal perspective. You could feel free to differ. Between our short-term relationship with Hinesburg regarding police services, separate from the chief services, and our obligations under the collective bargaining agreement, which essentially our obligations are to put forth a bona fide effort to fill positions that are funded, as opposed to, oh, we're not going to fund that position, we're going to contract it.
Sure, you've done a bona fide effort since FY20. You've been trying to hire officers from FY20. You have a historical proof of that.
And we have had that conversation here a couple of times, yeah.
So my concern is we're missing out on an opportunity with Hinesburg due to the union contract for one officer that we currently have. And I requested that you guys do away with the police department when we had one officer that was not working. We had no working officers. So we had an opportunity there to either renegotiate or do something differently, and we missed that opportunity. So now we have a new contract. We have one officer and a dog that we all like to talk about, but reality is they have a full police department and they're budgeting for a full police department. And we've been budgeting for a full police department every single year with no exception. I mean, FY20, full police department, FY21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and now we're looking at 26, and you're trying to decide how many police officers we budget for, 3 or 4, plus an administrative staff, which Hinesburg has a full police department and doesn't even have an admin staff and is saying no to it. I'm just saying, guys, there's a problem with the connection of these dots here. And I'm trying to help. I'm not trying to get your budget voted down. I'm not just going on to Front Porch Forum and saying, don't do this, but I'm looking at their line items and seeing what their costs are for tasers, for uniforms, for all of the things that they've budgeted in. We're over budgeting for invisible, non-existing officers. We have in our capital plan items like in the capital plan, you have body cameras in the capital plan for FY28, but you have body cameras in every single year since FY20. So it's like, are we not doing body cameras every year, or are we just doing it in a capital plan in the future in FY20 when we're going to replace them all that we haven't been buying?
Bart?
I'm just going to note that some of this discussion is not directly associated with the warrant agenda item, and
This is all Hinesburg and police.
no, it's actually not. When you're talking about the asset management plan in Richmond, I
Please.
dispute that that is related to the contract with Hinesburg.
I like
I would
Hinesburg.
suggest,
want
could
to
I
stay
finish,
with
please?
Hinesburg.
I would suggest that those items be addressed in the budget discussion, which will be tomorrow night, as opposed to this. We set this for 15 minutes to touch base with Hinesburg and their select board chair. And not talk about the asset plan or what should we have eliminated a police department 3 years ago.
Thank you, Bart. Hinesburg, thank you very much for all you've done for Richmond. I truly appreciate it. I think you're being very responsible for your budget planning and your discussions that you're having for each line item in your police department and other departments. I want to thank you. I hope you can lead by example for Richmond, and I appreciate your time.
Jeff?
I would just point out that this discussion is more than just about money. I think it's no secret that we have had a pretty dysfunctional police department for a number of years, and that we're not the department heads that we've had, and we've had many in the police department over the last several years, have not been very good at trying to hire. We now have an excellent police chief shared between the two of our towns, and I think that's been universally acknowledged. And I would encourage the select board and the town managers of both towns to take the direction from Anthony of how best to fill out both departments. And the last comment that I'll say is, I think this department is becoming more and more important these days. If you look at the increases in crime, cutting this department in either town, I think would be foolish, unwise, and we should be striving to fill this department in both towns and reach parity between the two of us. I think that would be best serve both of our towns.
Thank you, Jeff. Any final words before we move on?
No, sir.
Mary Lee, thank you for joining us. Anthony, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, and I think the whole select board would agree that we really hope that we can continue to work collaboratively with the
Definitely.
management in some way. And I do
Definitely.
trust Anthony. I agree with Jeff. I think Anthony is the one who knows how best to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so we have in our packet a letter we received from our town attorney that this board has not met or discussed that letter or had any communication with our attorney. What would the board like to do at this point?
The attorney didn't really provide any answers to
No.
anything.
So there was a letter received from an attorney that was representing part or some residents of the Southview development. It was in regards to the protective covenants that were found just a couple months ago, as you were talking about the cost share of the proposed or
Stormwater permit.
the stormwater permit. So there was a letter from an attorney to the select board, which I've included in the packet. Our attorneys provided some comments on that to the select board. He's also here this evening. If you'd like to get some more comments from him, he's right there, Dave Rue. The board could do that in public session, or could go into executive session to hear Dave's comments, and then conduct as much in public as you like.
I have no particular interest in taking it into private session unless the attorney thinks we should. I think this should be discussed publicly.
Likewise.
I agree.
Okay,
Respectfully disagree with the board and would like to provide candid and confidential legal advice in an executive session. But it is, of course, the board's privilege, and I probably will not say some things in open session that I would otherwise.
Do we want to consider discussing it in executive session and in public session so that we can cover both bases?
well, we would anyway.
Well,
That
true.
would seem like the compromise. We
Right.
could try to do that quickly and then come back.
Yeah, get
Public
the part
session
that
first.
can only be said in private and then come back and hear the rest.
I'd go the other way around, but either way's all right.
Just hit it, whatever you're happy with.
Maybe introduce the topic, go into executive session, come back and talk about what this letter says, what our position is and how we move forward.
Yeah. So we did receive a letter from an attorney representing I did it again, Southview. And the purpose of this executive session would be to discuss that letter with the town attorney. And then, of course, we would come back and discuss this in public meeting.
I think just not, no judgment, just to be clear, it's representing some portion of the people in Southview. I
Yes,
think that's just an important
fair point.
detail. I don't know
It
how
is.
many or anything, but
For the others, it is.
So for those of you, David, if I could, for those
Please.
people who haven't read it, it's an attorney presenting a legal argument. And it concludes that the town's position that there's a homeowners association. I'm not sure I even agree with the phrasing, but there is a homeowners association that may work with the town regarding the stormwater permit should be reassessed. So he's basically saying, don't assume whatever history there was
Right.
of covenants for a homeowners association is currently viable. That seems like
Yeah, that's a good
summary of the.
summation, in my opinion.
And so maybe go into executive session, hear what David has said, and then come back and continue the discussion.
So I'd need a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move, due to the matters involved, that we move into executive session to discuss the,
There's a motion
Oh,
in your
what?
packet that has all the straight.
Line
Right,
51 in the memo.
let me
I
strike
think
what it
everything
said.
should be transparent for the people that are gonna have to spend a fortune on this.
It will be.
Not if you go into session,
We have to.
you don't.
Legally, we do.
Mhm. I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay. Somebody want to make the motion?
I'd have to find it.
Oh,
Maybe
line
print it
51.
out.
You got it?
No.
Didn't get that far.
I move to find that premature public knowledge about attorney-client communication could cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Do we have a second?
Adam will second.
Thank you, Adam. Calling for a vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, aye.
Art, aye.
Say aye.
David, I.
Second motion is I move we enter into executive session to discuss attorney-client communication regarding a letter to the Southview development under the provisions of one VSA 313A1F. And to invite town manager Josh Arneson and attorney Dave Rue into the executive session.
Thank you, Bard. Do we have a second?
I'll second, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Calling motion to a vote. Please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, aye.
Art, aye.
Say aye.
David, I. We are in executive session. David, we'll see you on the other side.
Ready for a motion? Oh,
Yes.
we did move to come back in.
We're already back. So
Yeah, we did that.
we're just back, right?
Yes.
So I'll try to summarize. First, apologies for stepping out. This is really common where an attorney representing the interests of the town, in this case, the select board, steps out and goes, what does he have to tell us? So if we revisit briefly the history of the 3-acre rule that came from the legislature, I will just say I'm not a huge fan of this at all. So we are like, we feel somewhat stuck, but let me talk more and then entertain other comments as you see fit, David. So if we were to move forward with this compliance plan, there seem to me to be three options. There could be the town working with a homeowners association, stormwater management association. How many times have we heard residents of Southview saying, whatever those old covenants say, we don't want to do this. So everything I know, it's very difficult to make people do things they don't want to do. So if that dog won't hunt, we move on. Then you go, okay, the other option, or another option, is the town does it and just taxes everybody in town to pay for the Southview mitigation. That does not seem plausible to me, and here's an illustration of that. The mobile home park is actually on the list of 3-acre rules. So it would seem to be the height of indignity and inequity to say they have to pay for their own, and we're also going to tax them to fix the problem at Southview. That inequity is jarring to me. It just like, I can't abide that personally. So what's left? And there's actually two. The first one is it is possible to go down a tax assessment district. That is complicated because we don't have property control over your properties. So if there's no homeowners association to negotiate with, you're left with either individual easements or eminent domain, all of which is costly and ugly, it seems to me. Then I'm thinking if I step out of sort of the trees to the forest, both the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission have talked about the 3-acre storm rule as being a sticky wicket, a problem. Essentially, the legislature said, we have to do something about water quality. I know we'll make these private property owners responsible for engineering and implementation of this.
These select few.
Right, which is
And
very unfair.
A somewhat
Yeah, not choosing.
arbitrary, if not capricious definition of who is responsible and what they have to do. Parenthetically, I'll say, this afternoon I thought about this and I looked on Google Earth at where the water gets to the river. It's probably not lost on us that all of the water that comes from the hills up there has to either go over the interstate or under the interstate. I have never seen it go over the interstate. I have seen it come under the interstate in 3 culverts. If I ran the world, I might say, hey, the proper mitigation for this is to build settlement ponds just on the other side of the culverts and prevent some of the problems you've already have. I'm not a hydrologist or an engineer. That's just like the first place I would go. So everything I know suggests that the legislature will be hit with this again, as they're talking about school taxes, housing, homelessness, affordability. I think this is, to perhaps its credit, is going to be hitched to the idea of affordability for property owners. So on top of all the other burdens and unfunded mandates you've given taxpayers, here's another one which to many of us seems arbitrary and capricious, and perhaps the juice is not worth the squeeze, like how much silt actually comes from that property to hit the river. For those of us who drive River Road occasionally, you can see places where hundreds of yards of silt have gone into the river from right next to the river, and that has not been mitigated by the state or a town in any fashion. So, you know, just scratch your head about how much money one might spend for what effect. All of which leads me to conclude that I think, so we have a choice to make. Do we submit our notice of intent from the town only? And our current letter says it's just the town. We don't have site control. We don't have property rights for all these others. They will consider it inadequate and incomplete because it doesn't have the other property owners. I'm not sure it does any harm to do that. It's like we're doing our best to comply, but we don't really have an easy way to comply. And I think if there is a sort of positive path forward, I think it's at the legislature. And actually, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns is organizing a group, and they invited people to join their advocacy group about how do I talk about mitigating mitigation, you know, to address this 3-acre stormwater rule in an organized fashion at the legislature of this next session. So I think that leaves us like our next topic is to talk about the notice of intent. But I leave it to you, what motivation you have to join the advocacy group with Vermont League of Cities and Towns, because I think this came from the legislature and arguably the proper way of mitigating it is at the legislature again. Does that make sense to you guys?
Right, so the town legally can send in our paperwork and then wait for the state to do something. Because as you've said, we cannot make the homeowners do anything they don't want to do. We don't have the property rights. We don't have the money. Essentially, we're saying kick it down the road and see what the state does.
Yeah, so I guess our plan would be to submit the NOI because that gets us the grant funding. We have to submit an NOI to get access to that grant funding to come up with a preliminary design. And then getting the design will, I think our understanding and our hope is that it gets us to an order of magnitude kind of cost and property impact kind of. I mean, there's obviously some property impact, and that could be, I guess I don't know that. I would imagine there's something from 0 to whatever, so we can quantify that.
But we don't know at this point.
We don't know. So the NOI gets us to hopefully have some general answers to those things or ideas. But it sounds like it'll die there at this point. Nothing can be implemented unless, I don't know, all or most or however that works.
Yeah.
People that are affected want to work with us.
Right. And we can't make them.
We can't make you,
Right.
anyone.
And
We don't want
so,
to.
having thought of this idea of like settlement ponds next to the interstate for the first time today, I raised this with, you know, caution, like maybe in scope, we can ask the engineers to say, hey, is that even a plausible solution? Take it out of the neighborhood and say, it's all going downhill and it all funnels through certain areas. It cannot reach the river without going through a culvert.
Right, can't we just cut the Gordian knot and just handle it that way?
Mhm.
So I will at least try to raise that. I don't know whether that's going to be plausible or not, but it seems to me that is.
So it makes a lot of sense. When
plausible.
you're up your rear end and
There's a hand up.
silt, it's hard to
Yeah.
remember that the original problem is just all of it flowing into the river. So if
Yeah.
it's caught and sequestered, it settles out, it's mud.
And I think that
It's
that
dirt.
watershed is part of the affected area.
It is.
And
Mhm.
so there's a good chance that the design will address that, and that would be the most cost effective or land use effective or whatever metric that'd be the most effective way, but I guess we don't know, right?
Hang on. Kathy on Zoom?
It's Katie.
Is that for
Oh,
Katie?
Katie.
Yeah, sorry, this is Brendan Filkins, actually.
You're not Katie.
No, that's my wife.
Go ahead.
She's here with me. I did want to talk through a point that was just made about sort of the three options, and I think this is maybe more of a clarification for my understanding about the sort of the second option where it was maybe described as the height of inequity. And I think the comparison was made that the trailer park and the Southview neighborhood are, sort of in the same situation. And we've talked about this a couple times, and I've sort of asked for the breakdown of the composition of the percent of town roads in the Southview neighborhood versus, now I think we'd be talking about what the percent of town roads are in the trailer park. Do you guys is that something that you've looked at? Because my understanding is there's quite a significant contribution of town roads in Southview, and that maybe isn't the case in the trailer park. Can you guys speak to some of the statistics around that as a comparison?
I'm frankly not clear on why it's relevant. I know it's different. I'm just
Well,
talking about.
because it would be very different if the trailer park is entirely privately owned land and Southview is, the majority of it consists of town roads, which is contributing to the impervious surface. It's a very
Right.
different question, right?
I believe that is actually the case, that there are no town roads in the mobile home park, and that's why the town is not part of that permit application. If there were town roads there, I believe we would be in the same situation we are currently with Southview and with Greystone.
So when we
Um,
talk about the
but
height
the
of inequity,
difference,
it's a
if I
very
could-
different comparison, right?
Hang on. Go ahead, Bard.
No, so I think if we talk about the majority of the problem is town roads, is that the thesis?
No, I think he's asking how many town roads are in the mobile home park, and there's no town roads in the mobile home park. They're all private.
So 0% town, and what was
100%.
our estimate of the Southview
I
property?
don't know, since it's changed a little bit, but it was less than 50% of the impervious is the estimate that is.
Well, and you haven't been able to provide any of the data that you used to come to that conclusion either.
So I think we'll have a better handle on the exact impervious once the engineer's done looking at the study area in more detail. Because initially we were looking at Southview, Hidden Pines and Mary Drive. We had some preliminary numbers from that. We carved out Hidden Pines and Mary Drive. Even the Southview area has shrunk by at least one parcel. So as the engineers move forward in this notice of intent process, we'll get better numbers from them. But it seems like it's probably less than 50% town, but we'll have to confirm that with the engineers as they progress.
And the other comparable would be Greystone. What about Greystone?
I don't know the percent.
But yeah, we do own Greystone.
We do have, I don't have the numbers on top of my head, but the town again is less than 50% of the impervious. I forget the exact breakdown.
And in that situation, there is a homeowners association that has taken responsibility for both moving it forward and financial responsibility, yes?
Yes, and we're working on agreements with them for splitting the financial cost and working on the implementation of the engineer's design.
So I guess the end of the day, part of the initiative of submitting the notice of intent is to get a better sense of where does the runoff come from, where is the problem, and what is the town property owner split. And-
keep the
And to
grant
get grant
potential.
money.
And to get grant money to do it. And the other complexity is there, as people have raised here before, different property owners may be differentially impacted. We could expect that, right?
I would imagine, yes.
Like there's no work on this piece of property and substantial work on that piece of property.
Which
Which-
is the state's drawing a line on the map, nothing to do with us.
But it ends up in that
Yeah.
awkward situation.
Yes, in the back.
Hi, my name is Kevin Kittinger in Southview, and I just want to get a clarification on the study, because I heard you talking about the NOI may only cover the town portion of it. Is that study encompassing the entire stormwater, or is it only the town property that's within Southview?
No, the engineer currently is looking at the entire permit area, private and public land.
Go ahead.
Yeah, do we have a timeline of when we will have that study?
Don't.
This is all Southview people here.
Sorry. I don't have a timeline on exactly when they're gonna have that study.
6 months, a month, or?
I would
No idea.
imagine within a few months. I know they've been continuing to look at it. I mean, the issue tonight is an applicant certification for the notice of intent. So they still have a little more work until we have the final notice of intent. And then I think there's even some more work until we get better engineering plans. I'll check in with the engineers and get an update for the next meeting though.
That'd be good. I appreciate you guys' perspective, and I think of empathy to the situation we're in, and
Yeah.
I don't, if this was something like, oh, you're gonna have to pay $100, and be like, sure, form nature and do it. I think we're all just trying to protect our own financial interests, because this could be $20,000. Like, I can't
Right.
afford that. Probably have to sell and move, and that's really
Not
sad.
fair.
Right.
And I've done a lot of research in this, and my understanding is that there was funding for mobile home parks. And the mobile home park is a business. And I know there are people that they live there and they rent, or maybe they rent a space and they own their house. I'm not sure, but that's a business, which is different than the neighborhood that we have. And yes, there are probably income differences in the people that live in these, but I don't think it's fair to assume this person can afford it because they live there and this person can't.
Sure.
You don't know anyone's situation.
So I will say it is my considered opinion that on average, the income and assets in the mobile home park are lower than Southview, having
I would
known
agree with
many
that.
people who live in Southview over the years. So
Yes,
that's just,
I agree with that, but
So
it
that's-
doesn't mean that.
let me finish
just-
though, if I could.
Okay.
So that's where I start.
Mhm.
And my real point was not to just compare the two, but to talk about the tax burden. So if the town as a whole pays for everything in Southview, both public and private, that tax burden also falls on the mobile home park. So they get to pay not only for their own project, but to pay for the projects for the rest of the town, including if the town covers other private property owners. And I understand the distinction that there are public roads, so there's a partnership. But the real political question for me, trying to represent everybody in town, is do I tax everybody to solve a private, what the state says is partly a private property owner problem in one area? And if I do that in one area, why don't I do it in the other areas?
I agree 100%, but I think if you take an overall view, that's what's happening around the state.
Right.
That's what's happening to us too. Like, they're saying we have to clean up the lake, and we're just gonna target you and you and you, but not the other 90% of Vermonters. So it's the same thing happening to us.
It's actually the other 93%.
Yes, right. So I agree. I think we, and if I didn't live in the neighborhood, I don't want to pay for somebody else's, and it's not, and I have to say, it's not a stormwater problem. We don't have a problem. It's the state saying you have to do this to fix something that really isn't a problem. I would much rather, if I have to spend this money, I'd much rather it fix the problem. I think what they're saying we have to do isn't going to fix the problem.
Right.
And then, as far as the, trying to make us form this HOA or whatever, and I get the frustration with this. I look at it as like, my property has a big gully in front of it. So my water goes down there. It sits in there for days before it goes anywhere. So if you looked at me individually, I probably wouldn't have to do a thing. But I might have to pay tons of money because of something that's nothing to do with my property. So, yeah, thank you. But thank you for being empathetic and
What I
like
want to
your-
say is partly conjecture and it's partly stuff I happen to know. We all know that in the most recent elections, the Democrats took a pounding, even here in the state. A lot of Democrats lost their races for the legislature. And I'm on various mailing lists that happen to include these people. And there's a lot of discussion about, we got clobbered because we didn't address the affordability issue. And the affordability issue is not just stormwater. It's the cost of housing, it's your taxes going up, it's everything that makes living in Vermont so expensive. And this is the conjecture. Voters looked at the fact that the Democrats are going, we have a super majority, we can do whatever we want. And then they didn't do anything that actually addresses the taxpayer. As somebody said, how many of the legislatures go down to the VFW and have a beer? The perception is they're out of touch. And the reason I'm saying all this is because I think that people don't want to lose any more seats. People like getting reelected. I think we're going to see a lot of attention paid in the coming legislative session to stuff exactly like this, the absurdity of putting people like you in the position that you've been put in. And now that's where I'm going. I can't say this is going to happen, but I think they'd be idiots not to do something about this. And so the idea of kicking the can down the road, the town files its paperwork to be eligible for grants, and we otherwise just sit back and get on with life. That's right now, that is to me the safest way to go.
June?
June Heston. I want to just talk a little bit about the fact that you talk about inequity. This whole thing is inequitable.
It is.
It's a state issue. And so I feel like we need to be doing more with saying to the state and our legislators that this needs to change. Yes, we have to do the NOI because we do need to get information on what is this going to cost. We're all confused and worried about how this is going to impact our town. But it's as inequitable for Southview as it is the mobile home park and all the other 700 locations across the state, because they drew these lines arbitrarily. They made this rule arbitrarily. So I do think you need to put that permit forward, but I think in addition to that, I would like to see as many people as possible, including our select board members, go on and put your name in as willing to help to advocate against this 3-acre rule. I've already done it. And I'm not impacted in Southview. The line does not include me. I'm here because it's wrong. What they're doing is wrong. And then I would like to see you ask the state for the data of why they selected Southview. Because just saying it's got 3 acres of impervious surface doesn't mean there's a stormwater issue. So show us the data. I've asked, they say they have the data. I've mentioned this before. And I want to see the data. Tell me the data, like why you know this is an issue. Because if we're paying for something to be done there, but there is no problem, which it seems to be, then we're wasting money. And the other thing I would like you to ask the state is, how much are they going to contribute for the interstate, which is clearly more than 3 acres. If you're talking about 3 acres of impervious surface, then the state should be paying from one end of the state to the other for all of the impervious surface of the interstate, because it runs along the river. And in addition, the Clean Water Act benefits all of us. If you're going to pay for these initiatives to be done, everyone needs to pay, not just developments that they've chosen, arbitrarily to foot the bill. They created this law, they mandated this to happen with no funding source. And so now they're kind of drawing things out of a hat, like this might work. And so I think we need to be asking for them to come and answer these questions. And if not, then we get all these 700 places together and file a class action suit against the state because it's not equitable.
According to the state at the meeting we held over at the library, the state said essentially, you guys got stuck because decades ago there was a permit for this area. And they were only paying attention to the areas that had historical decades old permits. That's the science behind it.
So that was my understanding too,
Yeah.
that it was arbitrary, if not capricious, that it had to do with these permits. And not only the development permits, but the lack of a more current stormwater management permit. So they put the two together. X times 0 equals 0, so you're in. The one other thing I'd add, June, is you could also add Route 2 to your comment, because that is, as they've said to me in the past, that's our road.
Yeah.
So if it's your road,
Right.
then what are you doing for your stormwater? Including, we've had residents in this town express concerns about how stormwater has been managed in the Route 2
Right.
right of way.
And to add a little bit more, the state actually said at the meeting at the library, we basically had this goal of, we need to hit this number. And they started totaling up across the state, all the places that had these historical decades-old permits. And they said, okay, if we take all those, we get our number, okay, we're done. If they needed more, if they needed a larger area to get their number, they would have found some algorithm. But it basically came down to using this rubric of, we had permits once, that gets us to our number. So that's just blatantly unfair. So the fact you bought a house in a place that 40 years ago had a stormwater permit, here's your bill for $20,000. That's absurd. So yes, I don't think there's a person up here who doesn't think that's incredibly inequitable. And that's leading to my conclusion of kick it down the road until somebody comes up with a solution. I don't see why you guys should be stuck with it. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm still wanting to be chair. No,
Go ahead.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, I'm Southview resident. 2 questions. First, could we just get an update after the NOI has been submitted as to just what's going on and if we're able to access the grant funding for the studies?
We have the one grant for the engineering for the NOI.
Right.
I don't know of any other grants for after that. So right now we have to get to the NOI, get that submitted, and that's when that grant finalizes.
Okay,
Which is
yeah, if
pretty-
we could just get that confirmed, I guess.
Yeah, so that's
whenever-
that's the grant that we got awarded, and we have to have, I think it's the NOI submitted by September. So there's still time for all the design, and everything to have that approved. And that's when we have access to that $30,000. That's what unlocks that. And that, I think, was split roughly 20 for the fees and 30 for the engineering.
Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, thank you. If we could get updates on that, I'd appreciate it, Josh.
Okay.
And then second, I was just wondering, so I'm aware this Vermont Leagues of Cities and Town is going to have this advocacy effort with the legislature this year, or I guess this January. So and I know several people from Southview, myself included, have been reaching out to some of our local legislators, both the senators and to the state rep, who happens to live very close to all of us, and has, I've chatted with her several times. But I was wondering, is the town able to engage in those efforts as well? And are you planning to?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, the town doesn't exist. So what we have are the people here.
Well, I guess, yeah, or the people on the select board, like if
We can all engage
others are willing to join us in that
individually, right?
effort.
But we could also engage as a body also. And so those would be 2 distinct
Yeah.
things. I mean, I
But
guess.
the courts have ruled that the select board is a body that has speech. That's why, for example, we could fly the Black Lives Matter flag, because we have collectively speech. And so we can vote to express that speech.
So to answer your question, I was planning on signing up individually. And I guess we can take up whether we want to join it as a group, through a motion.
I think we probably should, but we need to draft that motion.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
And June and Sarah, if there's a website we can go to that is the official website for registering your, I don't know, sometimes there is a, put your name and address here, and we'll automatically send a letter to your legislators. Where do we sign up to go on record as individuals saying that we're opposed?
So the VLCT now is creating this advocacy group, and you just go on and it'll tell you the email to email. There's 2 emails there, and you can just choose one of them and say you want to join the advocacy
Okay,
group.
That's what I was looking for,
regarding the
thanks. We should probably get those URLs or the pages and share those, with Front Porch Forum or something, so that we can get everybody in town on board.
Well, I think that, so the one point I want to make is that, if you're not involved in this, because you have a property that's under 3 acres, you're not impacted. Yeah, how the engineer explained it is they had all the metrics and they lowered the acreage until they hit their phosphorus goal. So if you're under that, you're not affected.
Yet,
But it
which
would-
is an
exactly.
estimated goal.
So
Mhm.
if
Right.
that goal changes or we don't meet it,
Yeah.
or any number of things happened, it could become the 2-acre rule, the 1-acre rule, whatever. So if you're not affected now, does not mean that you will not be affected by this, and it doesn't mean that this type of legislation won't happen in some other capacity that impacts you in some way. So it's important that every single person, I'm not affected by it outside of being here right now. And I've been reaching out to everyone because this could happen in any number of ways that could impact every single person in town.
Yep, and the VLCT page about this, which I'll share in the chat, really sums it up very, very well. The 3-acre rule calls out a list of properties that have two things in common. One, they long ago had the same type of state-issued stormwater permit. And 2, they have more than 3 acres of impervious surfaces such as roofs, paved parking, gravel road, or basketball and tennis courts. The 3-acre rule requires that these parcels come into line with the new regulations, which need a new permit. The goals prevent polluted and erosive stormwater, et cetera, et cetera. This is a quote. Sounds good, right? Things have certainly not been going well. Like, there's understatement. But yeah, I will share this around and put on Front Street Forum and encourage people to take what action they deem appropriate, but I'm certainly going to send emails out.
The next paragraph is actually useful, I think, the list of. The list of subject parcels includes state and municipal properties, school buildings, businesses, and this is their language. And by some glitch of the matrix, a number of diffuse neighborhoods where homes were built by the same developer but sold individually to homeowners.
That sounds familiar.
Kind of the business.
My house is not built by the developer.
Yeah, I think
Many were not.
a lot of them weren't even built by the same developer.
June's
So it's
was, but she's not in the.
And then continuing after that.
That's what's so confusing is
Right.
it is absolutely arbitrary. I was in the first map when Hidden Pines and Mary Drive was in. And then after speaking up, suddenly Mary Drive and Hidden Pines isn't in. Well, then there's really no logic here. You're drawing it based on like who's speaking up. I called the state to ask if I had an active 50 permit. I did not, which meant my land was not in the development. So now the map is drawn beyond my border. So it's random. It's just completely random.
It is. It's ridiculous.
David, if I could, I'll
Go
read
ahead.
one other paragraph. According to A&R, cost is not a factor in the feasibility of these projects, and more than one property owner cannot share the permit. This, among other things, is causing a lot of strife. There are competitive state grants available to help with the cost of construction, but even then the local match can be exorbitant. Last month, voters in Morristown rejected a plea by 64 property owners in the Jersey Heights neighborhood to share the cost burden townwide. Instead, the town will create a special tax assessment district for Jersey Heights to borrow and pay up to $200,000 for the project, and a state grant will cover $319,000. So it maybe you're better off being further behind than those folks, because they're already down the path of like paying for things. So maybe it was not a bad thing to be so late to this game and be sort of calling the state out to say the legislature needs to address that.
It's such a bad, just fundamentally, that's such a bad lesson for everyone in the state, but guys,
We learned.
if you do less, you that's like specifically what I try not to teach my kids.
To be non-compliant?
Yeah, the less you comply, the less you'll have to pay and the less painful it is. Great.
Go ahead.
I've done a deep dive into a lot of this, and there's a Clean Water Board, and I did went to the meeting, and they initially did earmark money to pay for this, not a lot, but then a bunch of like $850 million of ARPA funds came in, and they used that to pay for it for all the public schools in the state. And like Jericho Elementary, that has plenty of green space, you know, they're spending all this money doing this project. And what could we have done with that $850 million as a state, and throwing it at a problem that doesn't exist for the most part. And then just the idea that you know, they didn't give any guidelines on how to do this, tell towns to create tax assessment districts or not, or you know, nothing. Everyone's just in the dark and has to figure this out. It's neighbors against neighbors, and it's just a horrible situation. So,
Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you for coming, everyone.
We'll probably talk about this again sometime.
I don't think it's gonna go away anytime soon.
I do think it's a future
Decided
action
to-
item.
Pardon?
We decided to ignore it, I think, right? So.
Right. But I think for our upcoming agenda, we should consider discussing language for and maybe approving a resolution on behalf of the select board.
I agree.
stating our
Opposition.
opposition.
Right. Right,
Yes.
so it carries into the future.
Right.
And we kick over then if we are gonna keep going to D.
Mhm.
It's also.
Dave, your
related.
picture just came back. Did you have something to say?
Nope. Was gonna remind you to go on to D in case you forgot it, but otherwise standing by.
Okay, thanks. The consideration of submitting an applicant's certification for notice of intent for the stormwater permit for the Southview development.
So David, I'll just observe A&R, the state is going to be inclined to look at this as flawed because it doesn't have all the property owners as signatories.
Yeah.
So we're trying to walk, it seems to be a tightrope to say, when I get the money for the planning, a perhaps best case scenario as we move forward with the planning, that the legislature makes some changes to the statute and rules.
But we still need to submit the notice of intent.
I mean, I guess I personally expect the state to view it as flawed and incomplete, and my response to that, and I say this, it sounds kind of tongue in cheek, but in all honesty is yes,
Yep.
because this is an flawed and incomplete mandate you've rolled out. So this is what you get. You get out what you put in, so. I guess in that spirit, I move to approve submittal of the application certificate for a notice of intent to be accompanied by a letter regarding permittee status.
I will second that.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Jay. Any
And
further discussion?
The one comment I'll make for folks who haven't read it, this doesn't commit Southview residents to anything.
Right.
Just to be clear.
It's just basically making us eligible for grant money and hopefully making the state, confusing the state long enough that we can, you know, disappear in a cloud of smoke.
We're not hanging up, but we're holding the line. Any further discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I. Motion carries. Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you for your continued patience. I understand how frustrating this is. To be continued. Are we ready to talk about fire department staffing?
Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, David. Hang on, we'll give the room a minute.
Your
If you want to pull up that PDF.
All this, do you guys want to look at stats or talk first?
Well, can we fill up a stats so everybody watching knows what? I'd like to.
Sure. Whatever you guys want.
Okay.
A little history about the members. The fire department started back in 2015. It had 19 members, then it went 2016, it went to 24, stayed 24. And it started dropping. 2018, we're down to 20, 2019, 17. And you get down to 22, we're down to 18, and now we're down to 15. And the average response time started back in 2015, it was 8, 2016, 10. And from 2017, the response time dropped, and now we're down to about 5 members
Chief, can I just make, you don't mean response time, you mean number of members responding?
Yes, numbers are responding.
I just want to be clear, we're not talking about the time it takes to get to a call, it's how many people are there when you get there.
So out of those five, basically 5 of us are 65 and older. And we've got one new member now that's going to be showing up more, so which is helping out a lot. Calls right now, it's just about bringing it double. In 2013, they averaged about 100, we had 158 calls, and went down to 145.
I don't think I gave you a, I don't think I gave you the actual, keep going down, Josh.
The rest are just charts.
Go back up,
Yeah, actual counts.
down one. That's it.
There you go.
Can we see
It started going up for 149 in 2021. 2022, we're up to 216. 2023, we're up to 226. And this year, we're up to about 230 something. We got about 2 more weeks left in the year. The call volume is definitely going up a lot. Next one I got is accidents. Car accidents on the interstate and car accidents not on the interstate and rescue calls. 2017. On the interstate, we had 45 calls. On the interstate, 28 calls were not on the interstate, 17 are rescue assist. 2018, we went from 51 calls in interstate, 29 non-interstate, 13 rescue assist. In 2019, it's about the same. 2021, when the interstate would drop down to 31 calls, 20 and non-interstate and 2 rescue assists.
Josh, if you go down, I think there's a chart that has like a bunch of different stuff plot on it. The numbers are helpful, but it's easier. You can kind of see trajectories or
Interstate is on the top.
And
So I imagine the 2020 drop would be the pandemic, fewer miles driven, people staying home. So that's an anomaly. That's not a trend.
in 2022, interstate calls are up to 65. Non-interstate 41, rescue assist 18. 2023 up to 68 calls. Interstate 57 calls, non-interstate rescue assist 24. And I didn't do the one for 2024 yet. But we're well above, we're probably up close to 70 calls on the interstate right now.
Wow.
And the biggest thing, getting manpower to show up. And like last night, we had a call on the interstate. There's 4 of us who showed up. 3 of us are over 65 and 1 of them is less, younger than that. And that's our biggest problem right now in manpower, getting people to join. I interviewed 3 guys, out of the 3, 1 of them joined. The other 2 turned around after I told him what it consists of. He turned around and told me we don't have the time for it. And we can't volunteer, so. The other thing we got, we're automatic dispatch with Bolton. Bolton comes to Richmond, we're automatically, we go to Bolton. Which has helped out a lot, and some days they only have 1 or 2 guys during the day, like the same thing with us. But say the guys in Richmond are showing up, we're all retired, so that's basically what we got.
Art? So, from what I've read, this is kind of a statewide and national problem for volunteer fire departments, right? Like it has to do with a bunch of factors, where people work, how much time they have, how flexible they are. And the idea that a volunteer fire department of 100 years ago, where you lived in town, you heard the thing, you go, right? And between 100 years ago and today, the world has shifted some. But in our current environment, are there sort of best practices, or what do people do? I know like Hinesburg started paying for a fire chief and 1 or 2 staff, if I recall correctly. So that's what some people are doing, is sort of a hybrid with partly paid and partly volunteers. Is that like the path forward? Are there things you can do to get volunteers that we haven't tried before? I'm just asking because
They're basically all volunteer. Sometimes during the day, they don't, even the full-time ones, there'd be the 1 or 2 on duty, and they'd be the only ones to show up.
Yeah.
But I'll just say the other thing too, that we've got a great mutual aid system. And like, if we got a structure fire, Williston falls on it, they automatically come. We don't even have we don't even have to ask for them. And say Bolton, and the same thing under those Jericho, Huntington, and Hinesburg. And they've all been great.
And if I could, David, how is Williston staffed at this point in time? Do you know?
I'm not sure, Jerry might know, if they're down or.
They have 7 per shift, plus assistant chief and chief on duty during the day.
How many of those are paid?
All
All of them. Okay.
So on duty means at the station?
Yes.
at the station. And they have a call force when they have a bigger incident. But they only have like 6 or 7 volunteers call force come in.
Kara?
Wilson isn't really comparable to Richmond. If you go to Hinesburg though, Hinesburg budget salaries for their fire and rescue, so it's got rescue included, is for FY 26, full and part-time salaries together is 227,000. With on the reimbursable side of things, so must be that is not possibly fees for the
It's
not
ambulance fees.
full-time, part-time salary people. That's $105,000. So they're sitting on $330,000 in salaries and reimbursables for full and part-time staff for fire and rescue. So you'd have to figure out what portion of that is rescue. But there's the answer to your question, a more comparable town, because Williston has all the box stores and all of that. So they have high rise, they have a lot more apartment complexes, and look at all that development that's going on. So you can't really compare Williston Fire Department.
Yeah, my question is really like having driven by the
Fire station.
the fire station for years and seeing lots of activity, just because they show up, like, how is it they show up? It was really for context.
Yeah, so there's anywhere between 5 and 7 guys there 24/7.
They
also run an ambulance.
And they run ambulance. That is a little bit of a disconnect there, obviously, because they run a full-time ambulance.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, Jerry probably knows better, but that's a large portion of their call volume is ambulance, like well over 50% in most places.
But the other thing, I talked to his ex-fire chief in Williamstown, what they've done, started at 6 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning. They've been paying like so much an hour.
A stipend to be on call?
A call, they take a
Well,
call.
it's not really all, it's not very much, but
To be available.
he said it's working out good. He said, I mean, you almost guarantee every night they got a call, they're gonna have at least 3 to 4 guys that are on call. He said that's working great.
And those are just normal volunteer guys that
Yeah.
basically pays the volunteer guys to coordinate. If you get a court, if you have kids, you make sure you have kid coverage, or if you're whatever, you don't go to dinner that night, like just all that stuff, like you are ready to go. You can stay home, you can sleep, you can do all your stuff, but you're ready to go to a fire call at any given time.
So I'm Ben Owens, I'm on the fire department, and probably, I know for me, I've got, kids, got a full-time job, got a lot of different commitments, so it's really hard for me to show up, and I joined because I wanted to after all of those things, but I keep thinking that trying to engage folks who are like coming out of high school and might stick around to get into this kind of thing, would be a really nice way to get people to buy into living in Vermont and living in a town and kind of building that community, and be they have some time available. So I'm a high school teacher too, and I've wondered about like trying to, I don't think this would solve the problem, but it could be for trying to involve like high school stuff to pull people in. And I know that there's an insurance issue with that for us. It might be worth thinking about that, because I do know like Essex town has something going on with the high school, like for high school kids, that kind of thing. So I wondered about that.
I was gonna retort back to what Adam was saying. Scheduling for me would also very work. Having a set amount of hours where I know that, I'm booked, I can go to the fire department and I can respond. Makes it easier for me.
Mark Connick, captain on the department. So I think in a nutshell, we just great conversation here. We got to be trying to think outside the box. The way we've been running the department the last 50 years plus. We just got to look differently. The days of putting an ad out in the Times Inc. and putting a sign out in front of the station just isn't bringing the members in. Something like a recruitment plan. We don't really have a recruitment plan currently on the department. Putting effort into that. Potentially, I would suggest maybe hiring a consultant, someone who's dealt with this to come in and advise us on this. We have no website on the department. We have a Facebook page that we hardly do anything with. If we're trying to reach out and engage folks, we got to be looking at this stuff. And the flip side of that is it's hard for us. We're showing up to calls, trainings, all this to be like, okay, now you need to develop a website. Now you need to go out and do recruitment on top of us already feeling taxed. So, Ben Franklin started the whole volunteer thing how many hundreds of years ago. It's like we got to kind of start shifting away from this a little bit, and like maybe it's doing a schedule. We need to try and come up with new ways to inspire the members to show up, excite them, give them more incentives, really show our appreciation to them. So there's no easy answers to this, but I think we got to try and do stuff differently.
So, this is something I've been kvetching about for a while because I get worried about the idea of people responding when they're over 65. They've, their spirit is willing, but the flesh is, we're all getting older. And I worry that I'm going to get a call someday saying so-and-so had a heart attack, responding to a call. Something has to be done. Also, we have to be able to provide the service that our townspeople expect. I have been, the state of New York has a law that allows towns to waive a certain percentage of property taxes for firefighters. I don't remember exactly what the criteria are. I don't think it's all firefighters. I think there's like a rubric of you have to respond to this many calls, etc. But that's not legal in Vermont. I've been complaining to VLCT, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, about it, and it actually is on the VLCT's legislative priorities for the coming session, is to try to advocate for getting such a law passed. Now, that's just another tool in the toolbox. If it passes, it's not going to solve the problem, but that is the outside the box thinking that we need to be looking at. If somebody who might never have considered volunteering might go, okay, but 10% of my property tax is getting waived. That's real money. I'll look into this. It's, it's a recruitment tool, but it's not going to guarantee that they're able to respond to calls. It just is going to make them think about it at least. So I'd like to see that passed, but we need other things too. I mean, I like the idea of what was talked about, the idea of paying people to say on Tuesday night, twice a month, first and third Tuesdays, it's your turn. And here's money to pay for it. I think that's worth looking at.
I'm David. I'm just thinking the timing here is sort of tight. Like this is not just supposals from like August. Here we are pretty close down the budget. So what I'm sensitive to is there's something we can do in the budget, and the one I can come up with is the on-call stipend. If we can cost that out as a, like, what does it look like? How many people would get the stipend? What would it cost over the course of a year? And put some money aside and see if it's helpful. It would be something we can experiment. From what I understand, it's worked elsewhere. And then one other thing I'll say is, I know so little about this, but I know a handful of young people who started with Richmond Rescue in high school and ended up staying for a long time. Like some of them are there 5 or 6 years later. So that early onboarding in the high school age where you sort of catch people's interest might be an idea to replicate in fire as they've done in rescue. Recognizing you have a lot more infrastructure at Richmond Rescue.
One thing I'm just thinking about too is with 15 members, I know for me personally, being on call would be a little tricky with my schedule. I don't know if we have the members to, I think it's worth maybe a pilot, but I think we would need to get up to 24 members to really be able to staff that, because that would be, I mean, you need at least a couple people doing that and people still showing up to calls at all times. I don't know. I just want to flag that I think it's worth considering, but you kind of need to staff, get the membership up.
That's a valid point. I think the other, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. It seems like a great plan, but there's kind of hiccups. The other concern I have, and this isn't like a concern that hasn't been brought up by members, but people's work schedules are different now. 20, 40, 50 years ago, they were more flexible, or I guess maybe flexible is the wrong word, but people worked closer to home, worked from home, people were farming more. There was all those types of jobs that allow you the flexibility to leave during the day and go do stuff, or to be tired from going to a call and drag working on your farm a little bit versus show up at 8 a.m. and do the same job regardless. And so that flexibility isn't there anymore. And so we can do something for the evenings, but I think during the day, unless we somehow have a next generation of people that are working in jobs in town that can leave those jobs for hours, potentially hours on end, or potentially many times in a day when we have a lot of interstate calls, there's really going to be a point where there's not people that can respond to those calls. Like I know Mike's in town, Graham's in town, and they respond to the vast majority of calls. If those two guys don't show up to a call during the day, there's a good chance that it'll be only Dennis and or Jerry showing up to a call, which is great from having a officer on scene and managing that scene. But no offense, Jerry, Dennis, but you're not going to grab a set of extrication tools and do any work on a car or whatever. So there's just a real disconnect between how people live now and work and the availability versus what's needed to really staff the fire department. And I guess the other point is, all these graphs show the trajectories, but they don't show the real alarming thing, which is that it only takes one of these calls for no one to show up for it to be massively catastrophic. Which I don't know, say that, but you really think about what that looks like is there's a car accident and no one shows up and then they call Williston and then they show up because Williston's always staffed and they're quick, but it took 5, 6, 7 minutes and that truck's coming from Williston or Bolton or wherever. So
Someone's
there's
bleeding out instead of car.
Yeah. And the other thing is the vast majority, I would say, I don't know what you guys probably have a hunch, but the vast majority of our calls are time sensitive, but they're not driving 60 in a 30-mile-per-hour zone. They're not running red lights. They're not that kind of thing, but every once in a while those calls definitely happen and they are time sensitive. And so having people respond is massive.
We've been incredibly lucky so far.
We have been.
All it takes is a structure fire or a bus crash or a train derailment to change all that.
Dedication of the fire department, not trying to toot your guys' horn, but it's a fact that the dedication is masking the problem because these guys are also dedicated. And some of them carry so much of that load when other people are doing things they need to do in life that it's hiding the problem. But at some point, it's just simply not going to hide the problem and it'll be a cliff. So
I was gonna say, a couple of years ago, we almost had probably a couple of firemen, could have been a fatality on the interstate. There was a fatality, but this tractor trailer truck was going south. And he come over the brow of the hill and there was some cars standing and he locked up his brakes. He come right down through the median, right into the northbound lane. Where all of us were standing.
Yeah.
And that's not good.
Go ahead. Yeah.
You.
Okay.
Mark.
Mark Patchinkett, Richmond Mark. Would also like to say that, if we were to recruit new members and we had new members come in, we'd also need a way to properly at least train them. I know Mark is the main training officer, but I feel that we are lacking in new members coming in to be able to work with our mutual aid departments because every certified firefighter in the state has, their kind of like a foundation of certain classes that they take to know what each other are talking about, or even communicating through a radio. And I feel that that's a weak point that we have. It's just, us neighbors talking to each other on the radio, but it's important when we talk to other departments when we're working together with them to kind of follow that same ICS structure. That also takes a lot of time and commitment from a new member themselves to be able to do as well.
So okay, all new members, we send them through a basic course. And they get the knowledge from ladders to hoses to extrication tools to Scott air packs. and all that. And that's what the biggest, fallback is you tell the new guy that wants to join, you tell him that. Says, I can't give up one day a week and a weekend to do this for, but for the 3 months. Every weekend and sometimes Saturday and Sunday and sometimes one night during the week. And they turn over to tell them that, and they say, no, says, I can't do that. That gives them basically the basic course of what we would like to qualify them for.
The thing that we seem to be inextricably going toward is having a paid staff member on duty 24 hours, just obviously not the same one, but hiring for firefighters just to make sure that we never wind up in that case and to be a training officer and so forth. But that costs money.
Costs a lot of
And
money.
it costs, but it's money that we don't seem to have any other options at this point.
Probably several.
Yeah. Say we have 2 trainings a month for 2 to 3 hours. For the 3rd and 4th Monday of the month. And that seems to work pretty good. And about, I'd say 90% of the members show up for them. That works good, and we're paying for 2 hours. And basically, sometimes the 3rd, 4 hours. But
David, maybe level set how, under what circumstances, firemen are paid? Under what circumstances are they paid? Are they paid for calls? Are they paid for training or just calls?
they're paid for they're paid for the meeting because their business meeting, because we do a truck check after they check all the trucks over. First training, we get paid for 2 hours. Second training, we pay for 2 hours. Each fire call, they get paid 2 hours. If a fire call is more than 2 hours, you get paid 3 hours. And it goes up to 4 hours, I mean, how long they're there.
So it rounds up to the hour?
And then they're paid, I think it's something like $1 an hour more than, I think it's a minimum wage, something like that.
I think it's a little more than that, but not much.
No, not much.
Yeah.
Couple of questions. One is there a fire service call fee that insurance kicks in for on anything? I know there is in different states and different areas that you're allowed to charge a fire service call fee, because if you're gonna look at possibly having a full-time person on staff, it justifies being able to charge a fee. I don't mean to just anybody who can't afford to pay for that, but some insurances would pay if you make the claim, right?
Having lost a building in a fire, I know insurance companies generally make a contribution to the fire department. That's sort of a nod wink. I don't think there's any formal policy on that.
If we did bring in somebody full-time, we have that ability to, let's check with insurance to make sure that our insurance, our VLCT, that we could charge a fee to somebody who has insurance coverage. I think that would be a key piece. But my other question is when is the last time that the select board did an all call and a heavy push to get volunteers from our community, specifically just for the fire department?
I don't know.
Not since I've been on.
Yeah, we've done some soft pushes, but not a big.
Okay, so that's my first go-to for you is you've asked to be on the conservation committee, the Andrews Forest Committee. You've asked for them to be on all other kind of volunteer committees that they seem to find time in their schedule for. This is a key factor that if they really want fire service from our community and want to support it, a lot of more people are working remotely. So you'll be surprised what the schedules are and how many people are actually in town all during the week and might have that availability. You had a lot of people that moved here for the hiking, the mountain biking, and all the outdoor activity. Hey, working for the fire department on a volunteer basis is some pretty outdoor activity and pretty physical. So sell it, get the community to know that
Steps and fight burning buildings.
this is, you know, make your guys do it. Hey, we'll film in a commercial and put you on some YouTube thing and get you out there. I'm not joking. That's the.
I was waiting. We've been talking this for 20 minutes. Waiting for that to come.
Dennis is in July.
Great fundraiser. Fundraise for you. Insurance paid for that. Thank you very much. But I'm just saying, I haven't heard this big push our community is all for paying for a new fire truck when we need one, even if we don't need one, we'll pay for one. So that's a funny joke I thought a couple of weeks back. But just my point is before we look to build a budget item, when you're already at an 8.5% increase or 9% increase currently and coming down from a 21.5% increase, I think you gotta really try some other things. And I think you got the department here saying, we're willing to have you try just about anything.
Hence the calendar.
You guys
Almost anything.
calendar all you want, but I'm taking the fire department a lot more seriously than that. I'm sorry, but I don't need to see them with their shirts off.
Julie?
I just want to respond to what Kara said, having had to call the fire department for my smoke detector, my carbon monoxide detector. I struggled with, do I call? Do I call? Now, I could probably pay a fee. My insurance isn't gonna pay for it because my deductible, it's not gonna fall within my deductible. So they're not gonna pay for it. And I might think, oh, it's probably nothing. If I thought, I don't know that I can afford the fee.
Yeah.
So I just want to be cautious of
I
that.
didn't mean that, June. I want to correct that. I want to make sure. I'm talking about when it's a 5-alarm fire, 4 out, a full day's worth of work.
I
People
hear
are
you.
out of work for the day. I'm talking, there's an insurance check that's going out there that could have some money in it. I'm talking that level. I'm not talking your basic call for a carbon monoxide. I've got it.
I hear you. Okay.
That's
Thank
not,
you.
I'm not just
Thank
saying
you.
just a ting, 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 that kind of thing. I'm talking about if you're gonna have somebody on call for major events, that's what I'm talking about.
It's a very small group of people that are gonna wanna run into a burning building and risk their lives. Just throwing that out there. So to put an ad on front page form or for the select board to say, hey, we need more volunteers. That's not the reality. So this should be planting the seed that this is the national trend that's going on, that if you want fire coverage, that you got to think about, maybe we have to hire a couple of full-time guys, or there's talk of, one that is split through the department. That's kind of the direction that, I've been doing this for over 30 years, that I think needs to happen. And again, we can try all this stuff, or we can, like I suggested, find a consultant that someone's like, okay, we've done this for these fire departments. We've seen these are the issues. We've done a video, we've done a website, we've seen this. Let's take a little money and be smart about it. And I just want to clarify, the statistics were great that Adam and Dennis put together, but I just want to clarify that that doesn't include the Bolton members in there, which that was a classic example of thinking out of the box a couple of years ago, where it's like, hey, let's go to automatic mutual aid. So the calls that show 4 members showing up, that was 4 Richmond firefighters. I'd love to see how many Bolton firefighters are showing up, because again, that's been great. They've been 3,
Just for
4
anyone
guys.
listening or anyone, so the automatic mutual aid, so every Bolton call Richmond goes to and every Richmond call Bolton goes to. So 100% of the time. Now how many people go is whatever, but that's kind of where we're
Yeah,
at.
and with that, the corresponding, you can see the call volume going up since we started doing that. So just to note that that tick upward is somewhat due to that, and not say that has solved all the problems, because again, sometimes there's 2 Richmond guys and we have 0 Bolton guys. So it's just luck of the draw, who's in town and who's available. It's that whole volunteer model. So again, if we wanna, this is a concern and we wanna address this, we gotta be looking at other means. Thank you.
No, I was gonna add on to Mark, but it's not just running into burning buildings. We don't even need you don't have to be interested in that. You could be, running the pump, carrying tools. Able bodies are really. Yeah, people that want to burning.
So the amount of calls, I don't know, but how many calls there's actually a building that's on fire and you need a mask to go in is pretty small in the grand scheme of things. I think, I would not watch like Ladder 49 and expect it to be like that. It's a lot of CO calls, a lot of car X slide offs, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of calls you show up to where there's not anything really going on, but you have the expectation that something's going on the way.
Oh, and I just would add on to that, that a lot of those, it really is important to have enough members, even if it's not a mask, but it's like to hold stop signs, help with traffic, so that the people actually working the scene don't get killed by a car speeding up. So it's like, and I think that's valid, that like, it's partly just about like manpower, like.
Kara?
The actual town's responsibility for the interstate. As you can see that the number of calls on the interstate have gone up and are going to continue to go up. What is the responsibility of the town on the interstate specifically?
If the interstate goes through your town, the town is liable to have a emergency service department to cover the number of miles in your town.
Does that entitle us to funding from the state in return for doing?
There's no funding from the state.
So we're required to cover the interstate, but we don't get any help paying for it.
Right.
Stormwater.
Right.
We're kind of on the unfunded mandate kind of conversation tonight. Yeah.
I know one department tried, went to a car accident on the interstate. They tried charging the insurance company for the trucks going there. And they ended up finding out that a very little, next to nothing for money, they figured it. By the time they got done, they said it cost them more for the paperwork and the time into it and the money they would get out of them. So they quit, a lot of them quit doing it.
Mike Parent,
Mike,
on the
sorry.
fire department. One thing to consider, if you're talking about full-time firefighters. One, in the state of Vermont by law, they have to be a minimum of firefighter one. Two, are we going to end up with the same deal that the police departments ended up with? They come, they get their training, they stay for a little bit. They go to Williston, Rutland, South Burlington, where the pay is higher. And then we start all over again. You want some kind of commitment that they would stay with us for a while.
Yeah. Good
An
point.
agreement, even if it's a gentleman's handshake.
No, an agreement, right.
Because otherwise you're gonna end up with the same thing, because we have had a lot of volunteers that have come through. I've been on for 46 years. A lot of guys have come on, they're young. They find they love it. And they stay with Richmond for quite a while. But eventually they work their way into a full-time department because that's the calling they want to have. And if you get somebody in and give them all that training, which will probably include EMP training, because that's part of the firefighter 1 and 2 courses now, is to get up their medical. They are gonna be prime subjects for people to poach from.
Okay, totally agreed. I'm gonna do one of my classic deep tangents. I was a terrible Boy Scout. I only went in Boy Scouts to go camping, but I got 2 merit badges. First aid and firemanship.
Oh, there you go.
There you go, right? But you know, a lot of kids are interested in firefighting. I just would never be able to show up for calls given my schedule. Otherwise, I actually would volunteer. But my thought is maybe we could be working with local scout troops to offer the firemanship merit badge or whatever they're calling it these days. And try to, I mean, this is nothing we propose is going to solve the whole problem. But if we get people thinking about, you know, while they're 16 years old, 17 years old, learning what it is to be a firefighter and getting that merit badge and getting to go, I don't know if they could legally go hold the sign to say, please don't run us down, but involving them whatever way is legal. And then you would kind of hope that when they become 18, maybe they stay local, maybe they get involved. It's just one of many things you could try.
All right. So I'm thinking, you know, both time limited tonight, we could talk for a long time about this, you know, and trying to cut to the chase. Part of me is thinking, what do we want to do for the budget this next year? And it seems we could do one or more things. One of them is, do we want to hire somebody to like take a focused look at this, as was discussed, a consultant, somebody who comes in and says, here's what we think has worked elsewhere, what we recommend to you. We could do that, and or something else like, you know, on-call stipends as a pilot. I don't have a strong opinion, and maybe you don't need to answer tonight, but we probably need to answer tomorrow night or shortly thereafter.
Starts the conversation.
What would the ask be from the fire department? Thinking that you're the experts on this for at least staffing the fires. And what is it you would need help with from us? And mostly, frankly, what we've got is money that we could put into the budget, whether that's stipends or consultant or is it premature to talk about staffing? It's probably late in our budget discussions, talk about staffing positions next year, but we might contemplate a path that puts us on that. I don't even know if that's the best approach. I mean, Hinesburg obviously landed on that. in
And are there
some fashion.
grants available? I'm just Googling. The IAFF has grants, FEMA Assistant to Firefighter Program. I mean, there are grants out there. They're probably hotly competed for. But, you know,
So to speak.
look at, yeah. No pun intended, but, FEMA does help pay for training and salaries and so forth for firefighters. It would be another thing to look at, and the limitless amount of time that our town staff have available.
The only other thing, just that insurance question of what we can do with how young an age. I do employment specialist stuff at the high school, at Essex High School, and I know that this gets tricky, but it might be worth just clarifying with our insurance company what is and isn't allowed. And then, also I know Essex Town and Bolton has done some kind of pilot, but Essex Town does a pilot, and a number of the departments up in the islands do junior firefighter stuff. And I think it's a small piece of the puzzle, but
Jericho Underhill did too.
yeah. Small piece of the puzzle, but I think it's worth thinking about.
Any closing thoughts before we move on?
I was gonna say that's a good idea about having high school kids and all
Yeah.
that, but, you're gonna have somebody who's gonna train them.
Yep.
You go the basic course and you only take part of it, you can't take the whole course.
They can get them interested, you know.
They can get high school credit for it too.
Yeah, they can get high school credit for it, and yes, there are other towns around that have done that. Can you at least please put the call out and really do the hard, strong push as this coming from strictly from the select board, and don't dilute it with any other requests strictly.
Yeah, and I'd like to say
And,
that,
and putting out there that you're considering having to put on higher staff if the community doesn't come forward, because we used to have 20, you said at one point,
21.
20, and we're down to
Used to
down to
have
15 or
Right.
24.
but I don't think we want to just put out, because I was on Front Porch Forum searching. Shelburne and a number of surrounding departments have been just doing here's why we need you. Wouldn't you like to kind of be a firefighter? Call this number. I think we should actually have some sort of open house and promote that, instead of just periodically just saying, give us a call. And that would be something that we can put our heads together on. What would that open house look like?
Yeah, again, thinking outside the box, just put something on the front page forum, it's not gonna work.
Right.
So
Maybe we could actually
think about
burn a
that.
building down and people could come take turns fighting.
Reality baseball camp thing, sure. I think if the select board is, if you're open to the potential stipend pilot and looking into a consultant, I would just say, from my perspective, that's a home run. In a way to, try and be proactive. I don't know what the other members, we have most of the fire department here, so you guys can chime in what you think, but for my personal opinion, that'd be great. We'd
So-
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that.
Maybe a follow-up to make that operational, like what do we mean? Like what's a budget look like for a consultant? An estimate. There may be like other people that have done this. And costing out a draft on-call stipend pilot, like, because if I'm really cutting to the chase for budget. So what do we want to put in there? Put a line item and how much? And then kick that around.
I don't want you to wait till FY 26 budget. I think you should do unassigned funds and do it right now in FY 25 and start it immediately if you're considering that, because your numbers are at an all-time low. That it's
Could do that.
not smart to wait till FY 26. Do it now. And why wait? And I don't mean to be, your community doesn't even know that you desperately need volunteers. I've never heard it. So I don't mean to be ridiculous about the Front Porch Forum, but that's how they've asked for all the other volunteers in town, but they haven't asked for this one in any time anybody can remember. So my point to you is you might have people in this community, at least one or two, it's better than none.
Well, it has.
come forward.
I have put about on the front page forum
But I mean, it's
for
select.
volunteers.
When it's
Versus select board. I see what you're saying. Sure.
them, it's telling them that there's a stipend out there for certain things, that they're gonna have to pay higher taxes if people don't come forward and volunteer, because we're gonna pay staff to do it. I mean, they have a lot more power coming from them, I'm just saying. But don't wait till FY 26.
Any final thoughts before we move on?
I got one other one.
Go ahead.
I'll give it to you guys sometime next time, our budget meeting tomorrow night. OSHA's pushing a new rules and regulations. If it passes, you might as well kiss your volunteer fire department goodbye.
Because you guys will age
Because of
out.
what it's gonna cost to do it. And
Oh,
they're saying upwards of $16,000 to $18,000 right now.
For
just
what?
For 1 year. all the new changes they wanna make.
Oh,
And what they want for gear and truck checks and. They want to hire like a special guy, come in, do all your brake checks on your trucks. And what's it gonna cost more?
Wow, I'm Googling it and you're not kidding.
so what I'm after is just if we have a budget figure, what's a consultant gonna cost? And let's just start with that. What's a stake in the ground for a consultant?
Yeah.
What's an on-call stipend gonna cost? How we start it, how we pay for it. It's like a fire truck. How much do we need? You know, like. So the same kind of thing there. If we can come up with figures, then we can kick it around, and figure out when and how we pay for it.
One more detail too is Dennis was talking about OSHA, and so if we were a volunteer department, OSHA wouldn't apply. We're not technically a volunteer department.
Right.
We're paid on call department, so OSHA does apply for town employees. There's merits to being volunteer and being full-time, but that was the choice that was made a long time ago to get insurance coverage for the firefighters. Primarily, that was the reason, is that being employees gets us covered under the town's workers' comp policy.
Workers' comp specifically.
So there
yeah.
would be a separate and distinct and different policy if we were truly volunteer. So I don't have an opinion on it. It's just, it is.
Yeah.
We're not, everyone volunteers, but we get paid for it. So we're not volunteer.
department ever operated that way? Pure volunteer?
It did at some point.
Oh, yeah.
Not recently.
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Yeah, many years. Just, there was a lot of reasons. It was just different.
It was really how to get workers' comp coverage was the biggest thing. Like if you get injured.
Yeah.
Then you have a workers' comp insurance claim and coverage. Whereas if you don't, you know.
Well, thanks for coming and starting the conversation. Couple good ideas kicked around. Hopefully we'll get some traction and resolution.
And it would be ideal to have like some budget like ideas or figures for tomorrow night. Yeah, I know that's really quick turnaround.
Already picking months for the calendar.
Jerry
They're gonna assign the newest guy in the department to do all the math for paid on call, and then they're gonna take the oldest guys in the department for the calendar. It's gonna be the opposite of what you want.
Hey, next we have review of feedback. from
Thank
the
you all.
Vermont Criminal Justice Council on the fair and impartial policing policy. Josh, if you want to lead us into this discussion.
And go into the. Even though I never slept.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure. I'm not showing up. You didn't show up? Oh. Thanks.
That would make it a great scene for cheesecake.
Or.
So,
0-0.
okay,
Who's winning?
if it's other than 0-0, you can't tell me anything.
It's 0-0 right now.
They're up 0-0.
We're winning.
Thanks for coming. It's soccer for you.
What minute are they in?
Must be end of the first half,
They're into the second half.
right?
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah,
Oh, they started, yeah, yeah, 45 minutes. Yeah, at this high end, it's like not high scoring typically.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Love that.
Don't tell me anymore.
Who's playing? Or no,
I've recorded it.
Cubs are playing? Yep. What's the score? Nothing. Who's winning?
Bring it in.
Cubs.
Yeah, Jeffrey Jones did a great job being an idiot. If I recall correctly, they're playing the Braves. And in fact, somebody's worked out exactly what game it was basically.
Okay, we got another one. F.
I think Josh is pulling up I guess he isn't.
No, I was, I'm waiting. So, yeah, we asked the Criminal Justice Council for more information about why we were able to have one policy in 2021 and now in 2024, they're saying we can't. So, just share a screen here to kind of review the exact wording that's really problematic.
Can you just explain what this is to?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do right now.
What you do, yeah.
Yep.
I just don't.
So this is a fair and impartial policing policy, which each police agency is mandated to have, and a lot of it deals with when officers are allowed to contact or share information with immigration's customs enforcement, so ICE. The biggest piece here is that the model policy that came out from VLCT talks about additional restrictions. In addition, agency members shall not share information, and then the policy, it says, other than information regarding citizenship or immigration status about an individual with federal immigration authority, unless, and there's a few other like specific crime-related issues that they're allowed to share some of this information with. The Migrant Justice went through the policy. They made a number of changes. It sounds like Vermont Criminal Justice Council will accept most of their changes because you're allowed to put certain more restrictions on, but they will not accept the removal of this line that says other than information regarding citizenship or immigration. Hide the chats too. Yeah. So this is the specific line that they want to have kept in there, and that is a federal statute and a state statute that says you may not restrict a police officer from sharing that information. So they will not certify a policy that we have submitted to them that would have that in there. So right now we're covered under the model policy. If we were to submit a policy that had that in there, they would say, no, we're going to reject this policy and we're going back to the model policy. Looking at our policy from last time, it didn't have that specific carve out in there. It did have wording that said nothing in this policy is intended to conflict with federal or state law. And I'm not sure exactly why they're flagging that we have to have that information in there this time, but that's really what the letter attempts to explain from Vermont Criminal Justice Council. I mean, as I read the two policies, it's a little odd to me because I feel like the initial policy says we're not supposed to share any information and doesn't say except for citizenship and immigration status. And this time they're really drawing a hard line that they want to be explicitly clear that officers are in fact allowed to share that status. And that's in state law and in federal law. So I think some of this fight is really state law and federal law.
Bart? It just strikes me when they keep referring to 8 USC 1373 and 1644, that is federal law. Federal law takes precedence over state law.
And there's
local
supremacy
policy.
clause.
There you go. So it's like, yeah. And I don't know when those laws passed or exactly what they say, but at least their interpretation is those things are immutable. You can't overrule those federal laws.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Are we saying, is the social justice group saying that we can't do what the federal law says we're gonna do, or says we have to do what the federal law says?
So Migrant Justice would like,
Triangle.
yeah, Migrant Justice would like this part stricken that says other than information regarding citizenship or immigration status, because they want to say, basically, we shall not share any information about an individual with federal immigration authority unless there's a criminal necessity for that. What Criminal Justice Council is saying, no, your policy has to say you can't share any information except for information regarding citizenship and immigration status. So VCJC, which has to certify and sign off on our policy, is saying we've got to allow that information to be shared.
That's exactly the nugget.
Yeah.
That's the piece they want to know.
I mean, if you read through, there's a lot of other things you could potentially share. There's a lot of other to the policy, but yeah, I mean, that is the biggest thing they want to know.
And that's before a new administration.
Right.
Yeah, so this conversation, I mean, those statutes date back to at least 2020 or earlier, because that's when the policy started to kind of get discussed. That's when Richmond just adopted a policy, was in 2021. The conversation on a new model policy, we've got the documents in the previous select board packet. I think it dates back at least a year, maybe 2 years to get to this point in this spring where they said, no, here's our new policy. So yeah, that was well before the results of the election in November.
Yeah.
So it's not politically driven based on results of an election.
Yeah.
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 That was
so-
really my point.
That was my point too. I've talked to a bunch of people about this and like mulled this over. And I think that no matter what side of the aisle anyone's on, I mean, paying our local officers to share immigration data info, it's just like not really.
There's no
where we
benefit
want to
for
put
us.
that. We don't want to spend money to have the one officer we have at any point. Like we don't want to do that, but we're not legally allowed to tell them not to do that. And so
But it's the same person in your town, the community that's causing an issue, you're not sharing the information and they're repeat offenders and not going.
well, so
That's specifically out.
but it would be that would already be exempt under A, necessary for an ongoing investigation of a felony which is probable cause. I mean, if they're investigating. So anyway, my point is that I don't think we're gonna eliminate that because legally we can't. And two, even if we could, and it puts a target on our back
Yes.
with the feds, which could be entirely possible, that goes completely against the goal, which is protecting anyone who's here illegally, who is doing nothing wrong besides being here illegally. So even though we would be potentially protecting them by eliminating that, if it puts a target on our back and therefore anyone in this town's back and the practices of our police department, we might actually be endangering the people more we are trying to protect. And that's really pragmatic and practical, but shitty way to look at it, frankly. But if the goal is ultimately to not to protect people at all costs, we'd like to, but to realistically do the most we can do to protect people, we have to take into account the fact that if we do something to take a stand, we can put a target on ourselves and the town and the people we're trying to protect's backs.
Reverse but true.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know, I like taking stands, but I don't want to do it at the cost of someone who's simply trying to buy food and gets pulled over's deportation.
I'm just reading something that says clearly the intent of these sections of the US code were designed specifically to prevent sanctuary city policies that limit communication with immigration officials. So it seems like the federal government,
In other words, they work and the feds don't like it. Sanctuary cities do work. They
very bluntly,
wanna
yeah.
Try to essentially keep them from functioning.
Yeah.
I think it also, I mean, it's in parallel, but important point is that the vast majority of Vermont is within 100 miles of the border, and there are distinctly different laws for what Border Patrol and ICE can do in those areas.
Huntington and
relative to the rest of the country. So we are in this spot where like we are, everyone, law and order protects a lot of people, but this might be one of the situations where there's simply not a lot we can do to protect the people that we want to protect. Doesn't mean we shouldn't do everything we can do.
Well, the chief has made the point that at the end of the day, how his officers work and perform is his call, and we can have a policy. The state can mandate that you're under the official statewide policy, but that doesn't mean that he's going to be directing his officers to do any such thing. On the other hand, he can't legally protect. If Duke wants to pick up the phone and call the police, the border patrol, he can do that.
And he'd be within his legal rights to that.
Yeah, and I think it goes beyond Duke. A human officer could do that too. if
No, I
they
was being
wanted to.
facetious.
I just wanted to make sure that we were clear that like.
We can't stop Corporal Cohen, to take an
Right,
example,
and-
from picking up the phone and dropping a
And we
dime.
can't have a separate policy that says you can't do that, because that would be a violation, and it could potentially put the officer and the town in some legal risk and risk of their certifications as police officers. So
And subject to federal prosecution.
The US code specifically mentions statutes, regulations, and policies. Anything written, you cannot have a written policy that does this. Notice that they can't actually legislate or manage individual practice or behavior. It's not lost on us perhaps that officers have some latitude in however they deal with the situation. Sometimes they'll choose to arrest somebody, take them into custody, sometimes not. I've heard stories in other states where, the person doesn't have a license because they're not allowed to be here. And literally what they did is they said, you got to have somebody else take this car away. You can't drive this car around because that's dangerous. You don't have a driver's license, but I'm not going to arrest you. You can't drive away from this scene. They would also have that officer would have the right to arrest the person, detain them.
Fully legally.
And Migrant Justice has shared some data. Within the last decade, there have been some towns in Vermont whose police departments were aggressively searching out and reporting undocumented workers. And the really ironic thing is that the jobs that these undocumented workers held were jobs no American would take. No one wants to work. Very few people want to work in these farming jobs that these undocumented workers will take.
Hard work. For an amount of money that makes those farms viable too.
Yes.
That's an important detail. Because having grown up on a farm, the farm that I grew up working on is still chugging along and doing great. And that is not with 16-year-old, 16-year-old Adam Wood there working at it anymore. It's just simply not how it works anymore. So.
No, but they have.
Go ahead.
But the farm has programs to bring in migrant workers legally.
Yeah.
So they don't all have to be illegal, and I don't think we want to get into a
Yeah.
whole social discussion about
That's a good
illegal
point.
and legal immigrants. And all of that. I think the point is, do you want to put a target by making a stance on the town's back with a new administration coming in? Or do you want to put something in place and our one police officer with the dog, is got other things to be doing in our town than seeking out
Yeah.
that?
I think that's what it boils down to is it's really, we're not gonna have a policy in place. It would be illegal to do that. But it really comes down to personalities and hiring and having Anthony here. I mean, I think I don't know every intricacy, but he is working with Josh to help us find candidates. And I think if we hire candidates that have the values of protecting everyone in town, that if that truly is the case, that extends to protecting those people. So we can't put a policy in place, but we can hire people that don't value finding every little thing and arresting everyone possible, that value protecting people in town. And those are two similar but distinct things.
Pulling over somebody who doesn't have a driver's license, whether they're legal or illegal in this country, still should get fined and penalized just like anybody else. So if we're not even gonna do that and enforce the law against illegal immigrants, but will for illegal, then that's a fine line that you're walking.
No, I think the
So
point is so that you can
write the ticket, write the fine, somebody else comes and get the car, done.
do whatever you gotta do, yeah.
Patty, go ahead.
Protect the people in town, not
Right,
file every charge you can.
right.
I'd like to correct one thing that was just said, and that is, we do have these things called guest worker programs, and that has to do with fruit and vegetable. Senator Leahy tried to, and those folks are protected. They have in terms of their protection, they're not slave labor as we see in the dairy industry. These folks have to be paid at least minimum wage. And there's visas and it's all, very legal through the government to do all that stuff. It's the dairy industry. Unfortunately, Senator Leahy tried to pass a guest worker program for the dairy industry and it got waylaid. So those are the folks that are probably most at risk and, and suffer the worst working conditions, unfortunately. But that said, I agree with Adam. I think Richmond is the last town now in the state who has not sort of accepted the new CJC, fair and impartial policing. I've talked quite extensively with our chief about our concerns and asked him very directly, under what circumstance would someone call ICE? Like what would be the reason? Why wouldn't they call, drug enforcement, the FBI? What would they possibly call ICE for anyway, a police officer? And he said in the past, people would, would see that this person was speaking another language and would might want to do something about that, might want to see if they were illegal or whatever. And so they would use the excuse of they need an interpreter because they weren't able to talk with the person. And I said, well, what do you do about that? And Anthony had several things that he does and he trains his officers to do if someone they're having difficulty understanding somebody's language or lack of it. And he says in 14 years, he's never picked up the phone to call ICE. It just isn't necessary for doing the job that local police do. So I think
Patty, we lost you. Okay.
resubmit the revised FIP that Migrant Justice did without all those red line strikeouts. And include that parenthetical. We all don't like it, but put it back in and ask the chief to submit it. And because they said that we are able to continue to add changes if we want to. And that one does have a lot of the changes, a lot of the things that we wanted in our FIP originally are in the revised migrant justice proposal. So I would just say the only thing they didn't like in that was the parenthetical. Put the parenthetical in, and I think it will be a better document than their FIP. And clearly they're going to accept it because we've already seen them review this before. And if we all think of, you know, our group is trying to think of like, what's the situation? Like if someone decides that they want to call ICE, do they have to talk to their superior officer first? Well, that's already in there, which is excellent. So if we think of other things that could keep that from happening, but you know, bad things from happening to people who live in our town, we can revise this again. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. So suggest Anthony submit the.
So we recommend to Anthony that he put the parenthetical back in, submit it, declare victory and go home.
Yeah.
We're back to work, I guess, depending on the time of day.
Find out what we just did.
So that's the migrant justice policy with the parenthetical?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you guys want to make a motion on recommendation or?
We don't really have any say in it.
Yeah, but just as a,
Yeah.
I mean, I can do it based on consensus of what
Yeah.
you guys want to do.
That's
or you
fine.
can do it.
He's not here though.
I think the consensus is
Yeah.
Migrant justice with parenthetical.
Yeah.
Okay.
and now the item on the agenda, everyone's really here for it.
Next is consideration of approval of an access permit for 3912 Huntington Road. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I don't think anybody's had any problems with it, correct?
I move to approve access permit 2024-05 for 3912 Huntington Road.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa.
Anybody here to speak to it or?
I was just pulling it up. I had looked at it, but I wanted to pull it up before I.
Like a reform of peak office, provided they move it a little bit, that seems straightforward.
Yep. So absent any further discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, aye.
Bard, aye.
Jay, aye.
David, aye. The access permit has been approved. Next is review of the draft town meeting warning.
Oh, which one do you want? Access permit, yeah. 3G. That's one looks good.
My only thought on this is there may be issues that come up at the budget meeting tomorrow that would impact this. So I would recommend we table it and deal with it tomorrow if we can do that.
That makes sense to me.
You all, it's on the agenda for tomorrow. So there's, like, put it on the January 6th agenda. This was just sort of a first pass at, hey,
Okay.
this is everything I've got right now. Is there any questions about what I have on here right now? Is there anything that you guys want to add, right? That you want to add? We won't finalize it probably until the second meeting in January, but I just wanted to get the conversation going and get initial feedback. And tomorrow, if there's new items from the meeting tomorrow, absolutely we'll add those in before we finalize.
Could you scroll all the way down?
Sure thing.
Yeah, I know this is in the packet, but I'm feeling lazy.
Well, all good.
Bard?
David, the only thing that comes up for me and why I just said that is under Article 3, it's possible we could have some a la carte items
Right.
that emerge separate from the core budget. You
Yeah.
know, this is what we're suggesting from the select board. And if you want to add these things too,
Right, like, for example, last year we had the discussion of the resolution regarding Israel and Palestine.
I was thinking more budget.
Oh, budget stuff.
you
Okay.
know.
Yeah,
But
You put
we'll
Article
deal with that
3.
tomorrow.
Articles will come up
17.
on the floor.
Yes, sorry.
Well, I think, yeah, so again, to your point, like we can, add, change a bunch of this until probably mid-January. So I just know in the past I've given the board a chance to look at it a couple of times, just so it's not like we're on the final day. This is the first time you've seen it. I've got a spelling error and you hate Article 7.
Good.
We have to approve this by tomorrow morning or Linda's gonna have my head. So I'm just trying to just get ahead of it. But yeah, I think we could definitely have those conversations tomorrow. And, you know, there might be other things to come up over the next couple of weeks that we want to add on. So just a first pass.
Yeah, this
So
is,
no major objections, it sounds like at this point. And I basically just tried to include every request we had, which was, I think, all the same as last year, except for one that we added on that was new, for charitable considerations. So.
And if we look at how much is not Australian ballot, it's really reports of the town officers, Article 2.
Mhm.
and miscellaneous new business.
Yeah, which is what, 14?
Yep,
Yeah, it's 2 and 14.
pretty slim.
Unless people have other ideas of what they want to
Like seating from the union.
Monorail.
It's something to talk about.
Moving up on the
From the
list, I think. Well, as our chairman has pointed out, there is always the idea of the monorail.
Ooh, I'm telling you, the Winooski Dome had flooding, like.
You guys are setting your sights too high.
I'm doing
Just
over
want the belt
monorail
line to
right
connect.
now.
Yeah, you ever seen that Pauly Shore movie,
Right.
Biodome?
We're getting,
That was,
we're getting.
that was a documentary, wasn't it?
I don't
Yeah,
see
no,
anything
just funny.
other
It's
than
a-
that.
the morphings together. It worked for a little while.
The work in
19
progress, but thanks for the initial feedback. Glad to see that there's nothing way off base.
Yeah, I really like that, Josh. That's good.
In 1991, our state constitution afforded us the opportunity to vote to secede from the Union.
What year?
91?
1991. Because we joined the Union in 1791, but we had an out clause where after 200 years, if we felt it really wasn't working out, we could
Well, it's still available. Does it have to be an even number?
Get 200 more years, we get to.
But we didn't vote to go out, so.
All right.
So moving on.
So next is discussion of an update for the town plan.
So right now, planning is starting the process of sort of reviewing what's been accomplished in the previous town plan to help them inform their next steps for the next town plan, which will be, I think they're working towards the finalization of that of November of 2026. So right now they're asking the select board and all their committees to look at all the action items that they had in the plan and report back to the planning commission with status of those. So what I was thinking is maybe we take 1 or 2 select board members, maybe someone who's been here for more than a year, and me could sit down over the next couple of weeks, kind of go through these. I've got an Excel version of it. Probably take a couple hours to kind of go through, add some bullets in.
Someone who has a lot of free time
and get
during
it
the
back
day.
to those guys.
Somebody's just retired.
I got
I'd
the
be
free
willing
time,
to
but I
do
don't know, I'll just sit and listen.
Okay.
What
So
time?
Bart, if you want, then you and I can maybe try to find some time in the next couple of weeks.
Are you volunteering as well?
Yeah.
I will. I may be more learning for me than anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know.
Can I ask a question about the town plan processing and, some years we're allowed to readopt the existing town plan and not have to do a overall overhaul of the town plan. When was the last time, what was the last town plan we did that for? And can we just potentially readopt the existing town plan with some small tweaks?
I think that's a better question for the planning commission. I don't know the answer. I know that when I got here in 2018, there was a new plan that had just gone through a whole process. But I think that's a better question for Keith or Virginia, unless one of you know.
Well, I think the minimum is to address the open items from the previous town plan. I mean, the preamble to all the sections is, this is our goal. Comparing the now reality, has superseded the goal. So making that comparison is important. And then what does it make a new goal into? That's where the meat of it is.
The reason I'm asking is we brought on a full-time town planner for the purposes of having a town plan be able to roll and not be some major project. So that's why I've asked the question about the internship in the budget, is because I've been here for ever, longer than any of you, potentially. And my point is that was the purpose of bringing on a full-time town planner, was to be prepared for this I mean, that we had a part-time town planner and a part-time zoning administrative officer, and now we have full-time of both.
So I don't know that the purpose behind the town planner was to avoid a process of going through a town planning
Not to
process.
avoid the process, but if, avoid extra expense with that process.
Okay.
And to be prepared for minor updates so that we could roll it and not have to do a revisit every time the town plan was up for renewal.
Bart? I just have a suggestion. No, we're talking about this in the absence of our town planner, so maybe have this as another, an update, like, so tell us why, to your question, is starting all over again? And to do it in a public meeting is part of my.
Well, I just meant, I was bringing that up to a point of reference that as you sit down to meet, to go down through your list, your 2 hours worth of stuff, it should not be the town manager going through that list. It should be the town planner doing some of that work is my point.
So
I see.
the only reason that I'm volunteering my time for that is because I'm been pretty close to the select board for the past,
You have to be the liaison.
well, each committee is being asked to provide this feedback. So like, you know, you go to the Interest Community Forest Committee, they're probably not gonna have a staff member sitting with them. That'll be their committee doing that. I'm putting myself forward with the select board because I've been very involved with the board's business for the past 6 years. I feel like I could probably help add to that
I'm not
process.
saying you not be there, Josh.
No,
I'm saying
I
the
appreciate
town
you
planner being there as part of, in case in case Bart has questions or Lisa has questions, you don't have to
Right.
go back and come back and go back
So
and come back.
no, I appreciate, I think, but my understanding of this first pass is, hey, what's the board accomplished in the last 6 years? And I've been here for 98% of the meetings. I think I can probably, with Bard, put those things down, give that back to Keith and Virginia. They're gonna gather it from all the committees and then work through their process. So they, at this stage, I think I should be involved. Going down the road, it's Keith and Virginia's show.
around the monorail?
And were there water sewer action items too?
Oof.
I kind of
Yeah,
remember
right,
this.
yeah, you know what, there probably was, I don't know what my mind just went to select board, I'll look at that, and that could be a water sewer update.
It was an
in January.
environmental impact issue overall, so, yeah, that's just.
And we
one
might look at
component of it.
that. And then go
We
back
could
to
do a
the-
pass, and, you know, I was just thinking it'd be worth having our planner either here or at that meeting to sort of set the
Mhm.
stage. I think there could be some FAQ kinds of things, like, why are we doing this now?
Well, yeah, I think that's a.
Keith will
separate
also know where
conversation.
the emphasis is needed. I mean, he knows what it takes to get it submitted and approved.
Yeah, and that, but again, right now, I really think they're in the information gathering stage.
Yeah.
of What have we accomplished? They're trying to gather all of
From the
that
last one.
to kick off their process for the next one.
Mhm.
And we can certainly invite Keith and Virginia to a future meeting to explain more about the process, maybe even the next meeting. We've got a zoning amendment hearing at the next meeting.
Mhm.
So they'll both be here. Maybe they want to touch on the planning process at that point.
Josh, I think we should really organize the whole effort around the sections that are in the town plan and just address them, you know, not really pave any new roads.
Right, so there's actually a
We got a lot- this deck.
so there's a spreadsheet that is action items that were specifically assigned to the select board. So we can literally go down that checklist and say,
Good.
did we paint the bridge red? Yes. Did we paint the dugouts yellow? No.
Mhm.
Like, and there'll be more to it than that, but like, it's very laid out.
was it gonna be?
Beautiful
Gary picked
shade.
it, don't worry about it.
Then the flooding happened and all got washed away.
Yeah.
So, no, but my point is that it's fairly laid out that, and they give me an Excel sheet that we can just sort of like.
Yeah.
What did we do? What didn't we do? What did we partially do?
Mhm.
What do we plan to do in January? That type of stuff should be fairly easy.
And I think there's a jumping off from a 2021 progress report.
Mhm.
That we did this mid-course
I
already.
think we did.
Bart, can I give you a little bit of I thought I had this figured out and I wanted to make sure I had it all right before. So there's an annual update and check-in and there's an 8-year expiration date on town plans. And so you can at the 8-year mark, you can write a new town plan, but that is not encouraged. What you're supposed to do is update the town plan. And I guess there's a few reasons for that. One, it's really challenging to write a new town plan. I
Yeah.
think is the last time. Yeah, Richmond was starting basically from zero. But the other part, and I think the more important part to outline is that you shouldn't ever be writing an entirely new town plan once you have one.
Mhm.
Because you should,
Just
that
update it.
would indicate
should
that
be
you're
building a
fundamentally changing course. So
Mhm.
you should be kind of recalculating and bringing in new info, establishing where you're at, getting the data. So
There you go.
this should be a substantial update because it's an 8-year update. but it's an update. It's not a fundamental rewrite, ground up.
Right, right.
And then there's an annual check-in that the planning commission would do. And it doesn't always come to select board because it's more just like them keeping track of metrics and stuff. And we could update it and readopt it at any point within those 8 years if it became needed, but that wouldn't extend the life of that plan if it wasn't done in a specific process. So yeah, this is a comprehensive update, not a rewrite.
But the 8-year lifespan is.
That's what we're coming up to the 8-year lifespan. So we're at a rewrite or a update. Sorry, got it backwards. Yes.
Going at it with a rewrite approach, we were going at it with just an update approach, which is like a majorly scaled.
Very
down
different
version.
scale.
Yeah, I mean, unless the previous plan was terribly flawed, it should be a rewrite because, you know, it's a
Well,
building
the
process.
previous plan was very large. It might be scaled back some.
I read the whole thing a couple
Shows-
times.
Correct, and I think if you see that comparison to other towns, you might find we went to an extreme, and that's why this intern, that's why I had that intern question, was because if we were just doing an update, what level do we need? I just wanted to thank you for bringing up painting of the bridge, because I did want to come out publicly and thank whoever did paint the bridge.
It was Gary.
I thought it was. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. But I wanted to thank you because I've asked you repeatedly throughout the summer to have it done. So thank you. It got done before the winter months. I appreciate that. And I know Jay, you want to move on, so.
Ready for approval of minutes, warrants and purchase orders?
Motion to approve the minutes of 12/2/24.
Thank you, Bard. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
I think Jay got it. Any corrections?
Nope, it looked good to me.
Calling for a vote, please, for yourself, signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I. The minutes of December 2nd have been approved. Next,
Motion to approve the minutes of 12/3/24.
thank you, Bard. Do we have a second?
Lisa, I'll second.
Thank you, Lisa. Any corrections? Hearing no discussion, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I.
David, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes of 12/9/24.
Thank you, Bard. Do we have a second?
Adam, second.
Thank you, Adam. Any discussion? Hearing none, calling for a motion to adopt the minutes as written, or calling for a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I. Minutes of December 9th have been approved. Purchase orders.
There you go.
Which we have two, right?
Yep. Both for Hinesburg Police Services.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve purchase order number 5155. The Hinesburg Police Department for police services in September 2024 in an amount of $34,590.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bart. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I. Purchase order has passed.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve purchase order number 5158 to the Hinesburg Police Department for police services in August 2024 in an amount of $34,142.50.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second?
Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bart. Any discussion? Hearing none, calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
And David, I.
Mr. Chairman, I move we approve the warrants as presented.
Thank you, Jay.
Ms. Bart, I'll second that.
Thank you, Bart. Any questions on the warrants? Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, aye.
Jay, I.
David, I. Items for next agenda.
Discussion of select board resolution supporting the
Not supporting the
not
3-acre rule.
supporting the jumping on board the advocacy against the 3-acre rule.
I could accidentally support it.
And also taking whatever action we can figure out would be appropriate regarding the fire department issue.
Although
may
maybe
discuss some of that
we said
tomorrow
it
night.
tomorrow,
Yeah,
ideally,
exactly, yeah.
but yeah, I think it's a good idea to have it for the one after that if we can't deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah. Kara,
FY24 budget,
Nah,
that's tomorrow.
Well, so on the audit, we can go over the draft, but usually what we do is we have a presentation to the select board of the full audit once it's finalized,
Yeah.
which that's been our practice and usually happens in like January for the final audit or mid-February.
Are there substantial differences between the conclusions of the audit and what we've been going off of?
For the actuals from FY
Yeah.
24 now.
Owner's project manager?
Yeah, I think you and I gotta,
Yeah, we had to talk.
maybe we didn't,
together.
I think that was that we didn't connect back after that meeting and say, what do we need to do? So let's do that.
So we were talking about, we decided not to put it in our,
RFP?
decided to put it in an RFP, not to
Right.
just hire someone. So Josh and I never connected on that.
Yeah.
That's what I thought you were doing.
So we need to do the RFP still.
Okay, did the select board take a vote to put out for an RFP?
Well, we can put an RFP out without,
No, we would have to take action based on what we get back from the RFP, but we didn't need to take action to put the RFP out. So we would take action after the RFP.
so, well, and
that makes-
Adam and I never connected to say, what's the scope of work that we're gonna put together, and then Duncan can help us with the framework, so we gotta make time to do that, and then put out the RFP, and then we'll come back with responses to the RFP.
Well, it strikes me the scope of work and that like we should at least have a tentative budget item. Like, what do we think we're gonna spend on this for what duration of time?
Well, I think our plan, I think it was gonna come out of town center reserve
Okay.
funds at this point. I don't think we're at the point where the magnitude of this would be.
Right. And I think we also.
Or
talked-
ARPA, yeah.
And I thought we talked about a request for qualifications as well, where we weren't necessarily getting a lump sum. We were looking at who's qualified,
Right,
and then we
so
would
RFQ.
negotiate, like, this is what we want, what can we figure out the price to be, but we would have at least some qualified operators to go with at that
You have a
point.
draft scope of work already?
I think, yeah, you
Yeah,
guys
we have-
have
we
done
have
some work on that
a
already,
draft.
so.
Okay.
So I think that's where you and I never connected to sit down and say, take that scope of work, look at previous RFQs we've done, make it work for this.
So it
and-
doesn't have to go into the front of the select board. Thank you for
Yeah, we just
clarifying
need to
that.
do the work
It'll
and
just
then
be done
get it out.
before January 8th, which is our next town center meeting.
Well, we can hopefully get it out
No,
before
I
that.
meant progress, the meeting.
Yeah, we likely won't have we
won't
won't
have
have
a spot,
proposals
but-
back by then.
Just need to go to the committee and say,
Yeah.
we're working on it.
Yes.
If we can have, it might even possible to have an have the
The RFP.
RFP put out,
Recommendation.
but we won't have responses to it.
I know Duncan's gonna, I'm not here a lot next week, but I think Duncan might be, so it might be something where
Okay, maybe I'll try to touch base
if
tomorrow. but
if
I'm in
you're
town
around
tomorrow,
next
so-
week, we can like, the two of you can put something
Next week,
together.
I'm around all week, actually. so-
Yeah, I'm traveling, so Duncan's around, you might be able
I
to.
thought Duncan would be flying around the world delivering toys to all the good little girls and boys.
That's one night.
That's the week
It's
after.
only one night.
Okay.
And then, I mean, geez.
So imagine if Santa showed up with that mustache. all of a
Should've
sudden,
leave
the Kids would be like, that's the mustache.
So, no, but he might have some time next week, because we were just sitting down today about sort of the next 2 weeks, and there might be some time to do that.
Perfect. Okay, I'll try to connect them.
The FY 24 audit, my question was about the discussion of the delay in it, not necessarily having you review that, but have that as an agenda item so you could talk about it publicly and to understand where that process and maybe have that help you for planning budgets next year earlier. That was all. Not, you don't have to go through the numbers and have the auditors here to present that.
Okay,
It's a process question, not content.
right.
Correct.
Okay,
We adjourn.
no, not yet.
Yeah. whoa.
Whoa, Camel. We need to talk about the update on police department hiring.
Oh, right. Mr. Chairman, I move to find that premature public knowledge about candidates for employment and the police department would cause the town or person to suffer a substantial disadvantage.
Thank you, Jay. Do we have a second to that motion?
Bart, I will second that.
Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Bart, I.
Aye.
David, I.
Mr. Chairman, I move we enter executive session to discuss candidates for employment in the police department under the provisions of 1 VSA 313A3 and invite town manager Josh Arneson into the executive session.
Lisa, I'll second. Thank you, Lisa. Calling the motion to a vote, please identify yourself and signify your vote.
Adam, I.
Lisa, I.
Art, I.
Jay, aye.
And David, I. We are in executive session. Thanks for coming, Kara.
Thank you for coming.
All right.
Ready for a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Now that it's 9:20.
Second. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstain.
Gotta make the minutes interesting, don't you,
Just
Jay?
trying to be perverse there.
Isn't a no.